plexiglass. I'm going to call us to order at 9:03. We'll do our land acknowledgement, please. Trustee Poitras. Yep.
Good morning, Oki, and welcome to our division office located on the traditional land of the territory of the Niitsitapi, Piikani, Kainai, and Siksika, the Blackfoot people, within the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta.
Thank you. We will now stand for O Canada.
Dad, what's that?
Hey Siri, are bison aggressive?
With wireless Apple CarPlay integration,
Bison are generally not aggressive.
the new 2021 Nissan Armada.
Recommendation that the September 21, 2022 consent agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as presented or amended. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Toon. Any amendments? All in favor? Passed. Emergent changes to the agenda. Recommendation that the September 21, 2020, September 21st, 2021 regular board meeting agenda be approved by the Board of Trustees as presented or amended. Can I get someone to make that motion? Trustee Poitras. I have one recommendation change to the agenda. We'll be moving E1 down to after E4. Any other emergent changes to the agenda? All right. All in favor? Passed. Declaration of conflict of interest. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees declare if they have any conflicts of interest relating to agenda items from the September 21, 2021 board meeting, and if so, should declare them. Seeing none. Moving on to action items. Moving on to E2, Deputy Superintendent. Superintendent Seguin will seek the Board of Trustees approval of appointing Associate Superintendent Richard Feller as Deputy Superintendent for the 2021-2022 school year. It is the recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the appointment of Associate Superintendent Richard Feller as Deputy Superintendent for the 2021-2022 school year. Sorry, I can't remember who was making that motion. Trustee Long, thank you. Mr. Seguin, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I'll just, good morning, everyone. I'll just add that this has been a practice that we've had in Livingston Range for the past couple of years anyway, that the formal position of Deputy Superintendent for the year alternates between the two Associate Superintendents, Richard Feller and Chad Kuzik. And so Chad has completed last year. And so by having Richard in place as the formal deputy by board motion, should anything happen where I'm unable to fulfill these responsibilities, then the board is assured that they've got somebody in place who can run things in my absence. So just a formality at this point. Thank you.
Any questions or comments? Trustee Toon?
I just want to thank Superintendent Seguin for his leadership and all he does in leadership building in our division. It's amazing that we have two capable and qualified associate superintendents that could fill in that role, and appreciate the skill building that you do in all our staff.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. I'd like to echo that and thank also Mr. Kuzik for his leadership in his role too. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? Trustee Poitras?
Sorry, I forgot to add an emergent motion. Can we still go back and do that, or?
Let's finish with this
Okay.
one first, this
Okay.
action item, and
Okay.
then we can revisit it if the
Okay.
board so chooses.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments around the appointment of Richard Feller? Okay, seeing none. All in favor? Passed. Thank you. We had a point of interest brought up. If the board so chooses, we can go back and add an emergent item to the agenda. Is there any opposed to that? Okay, Trustee Poitras, what would you like to add? We will make it E5.
I would like to discuss the external appointment of the Pincher Creek Early Learning Committee that we currently sit on and our role there. And I apologize for not mentioning it at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Trustee Poitras. Is there any opposition to having that as an emergent item to our agenda? Seeing none, we will now add E5 for the external appointment to the Pincher Creek Early Learning Committee. Thank you. All right, so again, that's E5. Trustee Toon?
Madam Chair, thank you. Just have a quick notice of motion for the next board meeting. We'll take care of it now, since we're doing stuff that's off the agenda right now. So it's the recommendation, and I can send this to Nikki afterwards, the wording for this for the next agenda. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve amending the Audit Committee membership to include 3 trustees and 2 community members. I apologize. The intent was to have it on this agenda, but I missed the deadline for that, so that I'll move that as a notice of motion to the next board meeting. Provide background for that. Thanks.
Okay, and you will send in your recommendation to Nikki. And okay, any
thanks.
opposed to that being added to the agenda for a notice of motion? Okay, thank you. All right, now I need to find where I am again. Okay. On to E3, we're going on to our board policy. Board Policy Review Committee Chair Clara Yegas will provide an update regarding board policies. It is the recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the changes made to the discussed board policies as presented or amended. Trustee Yegas, you've made that motion. Would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I would. I'm going to do these in two separate motions, because the first one is very important and does a major change to our policy. Well, to part of their policy, okay? So what I'm going to be looking at is Policy 5, Appendix A. I move that the title of this Appendix A be called Conflict Resolution and Code of Conduct Sanctions, rather than just sanctions.
That's the motion you're putting on the floor right now?
No, no, I'm gonna put the whole part of it on. I'm just gonna go slow so everybody gets it, okay? The next part we're gonna be looking at is 2A. And I'll tell you the ones that we're gonna be changing on there. I'll just read it off. A trustee who believes that a fellow trustee has violated the code of conduct may seek resolution of the matter through appropriate conciliatory measures prior to the commencing of an official complaint under the code of conduct. We're removing, for example, on that one. We're going to then put on the next line, conflict resolution action inquiry form should be filled out and sent to the board chair regarding the violation. Now that's new. And then in the next paragraph, conciliatory measures include the board chair and 2 mutually agreed upon trustees reviewing board policy 3, role of the trustee, and board policy 5, trustee code of conduct as it relates to any concern. So those are the changes we're making to that. And do you want me, I'll give the rationale for those changes.
Trustee, I guess, can we just put the motion on the floor so then we can discuss it too?
Okay, the motion is that we change the name of this to what is said there, conflict resolution and code of conduct sanctions.
So we can take the first part of the recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve the changes made to the conflict, or the,
To policy 5.
to policy 5.
Is it policy? Yeah, Appendix A. Calling it code of conflict resolution and code of conduct sanctions. And then the second, number 2 under this Appendix A, policy 5, Appendix A, add a conflict resolution action inquiry form should be filled out and sent to the board chair regarding the violation.
Okay.
And then the next, it's a new paragraph, conciliatory measures, and then add 2 mutually agreed upon trustees rather than 1. Okay.
Okay. While Nikki's adding that in there, is there anything else you wanted to add, or can I open up the floor for discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to give a rationale for it before we
Thank you.
speak to it. Okay. The rationale was that we found that with our sanctions is that it just jumped right into the formal ones, and there needed to be some other ways that we could, if there was some issue going on, that the trustees and the chair would have a way in order to talk to the trustee about it so that there could be some resolution to it in a amicable way that it happened. And so we hope that this is going to give the chair and the trustees a way that is mediation to resolve the conflict, like conflict resolution. Okay.
Thank you, Trustee Yegas. Any questions or comments? Trustee Poitras?
I just want to say thank you to the policy committee. I think this is a great move. When there's conflict, it's nice to have clear direction and how to move, not if you don't want to jump to sanctions, and it's just something that needs to be cleared up, but is a little bit smaller. And I think it's great to have 2 people in the room who are there purely to listen and not putting one person in the middle if something should happen and need to go before the board or go further. So I think this is an excellent change, and I think it's a good idea to have the 2 there. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Poitras. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Trustee Yegas, was there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
Yes, I'd like to make another motion.
let's vote on
Oh, I'm
this
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll close this motion first, and then you
Yeah,
can
sorry.
definitely make another one. Yeah.
Jumping ahead of myself.
Okay, seeing nothing else, any opposed? Sorry, I did that backwards. I'm used to Zoom and then not Zoom, and first board meeting back in the boardroom. Okay, so seeing no opposition, passed. All right, trustee Yegus, would you like to make the second motion?
Yes, and this next motion is in regards to policy 9, committees of the board. First of all, in policy 9, in the preamble, I'd like to add in the sentence that says, a record of decisions will be kept for each committee meeting, I'd like to add, submitted no later than 1 week after the meeting date to the executive assistant and board chair. And then I'd also like to add onto that, no, just that, okay. But I am going to add some more things because I'm going to do all these together rather than doing them all separately for that policy, okay? So that's one change. The second change on this motion is on D, the planning committee, we add the committee of the whole in brackets. And the third change on that, and this is also on D, it's 4, Roman numeral 4. It says must, so we'll put shall be held.
Was there anything else you wanted to add into that? I just want to let Nikki get caught up here.
I think, yes, there's one more I'm going to be adding on to the committees. And
it still
that
under-
is Committee H, the Labor Relations Committee. Under membership, we'll add, the chair will be identified as the provincial negotiator, and I don't know if we got the right terms there. Or the,
For the TIBA rep? yeah.
TIBA negotiator, yeah, the TIBA representative, I guess, is the best way to put it. Will be the TIBA representative, and that's TEBA.
Trustee Tin, did you have a comment around that?
Yeah, I think we wanted to steer away from TIBA because names can change and
Okay.
provincial organization, if we just have it as provincial negotiator, it would cover whatever iteration of the current form would we take on that.
Okay.
That was my understanding on why we went with that instead of naming the exact group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, I think we talked about that before, so yes, so put provincial negotiator like it was.
And so I just need to be clear here. I see your hand up, trustee Long. I'll just be 1 sec. All of this you want in the motion is the changes?
Yeah,
Okay.
because they're all in the same policy.
Okay. Are you okay now, Nikki, with everything? Okay. Trustee Long, were you wanting to comment on the provincial negotiator part of it? Or is this a discussion that we can have once the motion's on the floor? Okay,
May I speak?
yes.
The rep is not really, it's not a negotiator. So, where was that, Nikki, that line? Oh, yeah, chair will be identified as provincial negotiator. Negotiation representative, provincial negotiations representative, or
Yeah,
you don't do any negotiating.
that's, yeah,
Yeah,
right.
So could we put provincial representative?
Yeah,
yeah, there's a committee.
thank you.
Yeah,
Does all
so
the
we'll call that the
negotiating.
provincial
So
representative.
you're
Yeah.
You're there to give your
Yeah.
opinion and share the information with your zone and your trustees, so identified as provincial negotiations representative. Would that be all right with trustee Toon?
Definitely, Trustee Long, appreciate your work you've done in this role for the past 4 years. It's been amazing.
Thank you, Trustee Long and Trustee Toon, for helping with the wording of this. And so that's my motion.
Okay. Nikki has the motion written on the policy review chair, that the Board of Trustees approve the changes to policy 9, submitted no later than the 1 week after the meeting date to the executive assistant and board chair. The change made to the committee of the whole under number 2. Planning, the committee of the whole will be added into, in brackets, after planning. Meeting shall be held prior to the annual organization meeting, and the membership under, sorry, what was it under?
That was under the Labor Relations
The Labor
Committee.
Relations, thank you, sorry. Add that the chair will be identified as a provincial negotiation representative. The motion is on the floor. Any questions or comments?
I'll just speak to that. This really cleans up some of the misunderstanding, or when you're reading the whole regarding some of these policies. So we just, like, for example, planning, which really is our committee of the whole, and but there are some planning meetings, so we just wanted to identify that and to make sure the things, some of the committees that we had, for example, the Labor Relations Committee, it was mentioned in policy, so everybody would remember it.
Thank you, Trustee Yegas. Anything else that anybody would like to have a comment or question on? All right, seeing none, the motion is on the floor. All in favor? Thank you. Passed. Trustee Yegas, was there anything else?
At this point, we will say no. However, look forward to more policy changes in the future.
Policy is always a great way for PD learning and to review our policies. They take a while to learn, so we appreciate the policy committee bringing us different changes to the policy as needed. Thank you. All right, we're moving on in our agenda now to E4, our professional learning. Recommendation that the Board of Trustees approve following tests to attend any professional development. Was there anyone seeking any professional development requests? Okay, seeing none. Can we move on to can we do E5? Trustee Poitras, do you have the motion? Okay.
Nikki, I sent you an email with the motion. If it's easier for me to just read it out to you, that's fine too, whichever's. Sure, you bet. Okay, so should I bring up the motion, then we'll discuss it?
Yeah, please bring up the motion and we'll put it on the floor and then we'll be able to discuss
The
it.
motion is that the Board of Trustees move that the external appointment trustees move that the external appointment position on the Pincher Creek Community Early Learning Committee become an advisory position rather than a voting member. of the board. Perfect. Thank you, and I'm sorry that I didn't send that to you earlier. So just to speak to this a little bit, I've had a wonderful opportunity to sit on the Pincher Creek Community Early Learning Committee, which is a committee that is comprised of a few members from the town of Pincher Creek and 4 members from the council, as well as myself and a trustee from the other school division in Pincher Creek. It's been great to work together as we've built 2 new early learning centers in Pincher Creek on both the School of St. Michael's and Canyon's property. As we've gone through this process together, we've made it so the 2 sites are very similar, and there's a lot of fluid movement between the 2 and planning together. So it's really strengthened some of our relationships with some of the families with just younger members in the community and the other school as well as town council. However, as we are done building the buildings and have established the programs in both sites, I feel like it's time for us to just become an advisor so that we can make sure that our calendars are running close together. But as the PCCELC is in charge of running the preschool, they're making financial decisions, staffing decisions, and I feel like that's something that we no longer need to be a part of a voting member of those special meetings. So I would move that we continue to foster that relationship, sit as an advisor, as well as to receive information, but remove ourselves from the voting portion. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Trustee Poitras. Was there any other motion is on the floor? Is there any questions or comments? I want to thank you, Trustee Poitras, for sitting on this committee. I feel like it was a great way to build relationships, especially with Pincher Creek and the early learning. But I understand your rationale on being part of voting in for when it comes to choices on staff and the monies associated. So I do feel that having an advisory role will still be a great relationship builder with the Pincher Creek early learning. So thank you again. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. Passed. Yes.
No, that's okay.
It's okay? Okay. Please, no, you have something you'd like, is it tied to the Pincher Creek? Okay, then.
I was wondering if the board would think it would be appropriate to make a second motion asking our advisory committee or our advocacy committee to write a letter kind of explaining why we've moved in this direction. So that that can be taken to the board and shared with the other trustee that sits on that council as well. I just wondered if that is something that the advisory committee would do on behalf of the whole board, because this position could be filled by any trustee.
So you'd like to put a motion on the floor that advocacy write a letter to the Pincher Creek Early Learning Center or Community Early Learning?
Yeah, PCCELC.
PCLC, sorry.
Explaining why we're moving in this direction.
Okay. I think that would be appropriate. Yeah. So Trustee Poitras moved that the Board of Trustees direct Advocacy Committee to write a letter to the PPCLC explaining why we are moving in this direction. The motion is on the floor. Any questions or comments? Trustee Toon?
No, I think this is a great idea, Trustee Poitras. I think it'll help continue the communication and foster the relationship continue the relationship that Trustee Poitras and the board has fostered with that group. So I appreciate her bringing the motion forward.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Was there anything else you'd like to add, Trustee Poitras?
Just I'm grateful that I had the opportunity to serve, and I hope if anyone else serves in this capacity that they enjoy it as much as I do. And it took me the full 2 years to get the PCCELC down, so don't worry that you didn't quite get it. So thank you to the board for your support.
Thank you, Trustee Poitras. All in favor? Thank you, passed. All right, moving on to E1 now. Sorry, just need to find it. Moving on to our borrowing resolution. Enclosed with the agenda is a copy of the proposed borrowing resolution for the 2021-2022 school year. It is the recommendation of the Board of Trustees approve the borrowing resolution which authorizes the board to borrow such sums as the board may deem necessary to meet current expenditures during the 2021-2022 school year. Trustee McKee has made that motion. Did you want to speak to it, Trustee McKee, or we can turn it over to Mr. Perry?
Well, I'll just say a couple of things. There's an attachment that was made for this meeting. It's called the Alberta Borrowing Resolution, Livingston Range School Division, and it goes through the explanation as of the amount of money and the whereas and why this is necessary for the school division. I see that Mr. Perry is here. I don't know if you want to add something to that, Mr. Perry, but the first paragraph of that attachment explains why the process is required.
Thank you, Trustee McKee. Mr. Perry?
I think Trustee McKee explained it very well. I'll just add that as time goes by and as we will experience a reduction in revenue going into next year, that this line of credit will be important to the jurisdiction to ensure that we don't go into a deficit position within our cash flow. Currently, we don't anticipate that for this year, but the process to get this line of credit back in place is significant, and so continuing to have it in place and protecting the cash flow for the jurisdiction, I think, is important, especially going into the following year where resources will not be as plentiful.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Oh, is there any other questions or comments? Trustee McKee, did you have your hand up? Oh. Okay. Would you like to say anything else to close, Trustee McKee?
Oh, this resolution is done every year. It's not something that's that is new. So with that in mind, I will just end. Yep.
Thank you, Trustee McKee. All in favor? Passed. Thank you. All right, moving on to our discussion items. We have our preliminary enrollment update. Mr. Jeff Perry, Associate Superintendent of Business Services, will review the preliminary enrollment figures for the 2021-2022 school year. Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could ask that maybe you go to the next item while I email a document to Nikki to get that in place so that there's not a delay in time, then I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely. Moving on to F2, our art gala. Trustee Toon will give an update regarding the 15th Annual Emerging Arts Gala. Trustee Toon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's that time of year where we traditionally get ready to welcome in all the amazing artwork from our students that we display here at Central Office, and I know it's the event is one of my favorite things that we do as trustee, recognizing the great work of our talented students throughout the division. allowing the public to come and see that. With everything that's going on, things last year didn't happen as normal, and with the current conditions, that is again regretfully going to happen. But after discussions with the board, we are excited for to look for alternative ways that we can recognize these students and make sure that we still celebrate the great artists that we have throughout the division and through all the grades and all our schools that we have. So if you have anything else as a committee member, Madam Chair, to add to that.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. This is always a great committee to be on, and I love seeing all the talented artwork turned in from all our schools, and our hallways upstairs look so bare when the artwork's not displayed on there. Whoever sits on the art committee next year or this school year is in for just a great experience. Yeah, I think that we again will have the discussions as a board and hoping to change the art gala so that under the current conditions we'll be able to showcase our students. A video was created last year, and the students were recognized in their own classrooms with their awarded certificates, and the artwork was still displayed upstairs, but I look forward to more discussion on this. So thank you. Any other questions or comments around this? Trustee Poitras?
Yeah, I just want to say that the pandemic has been an interesting time, and a lot of changes has come about, and I just really appreciate that you know, we've gone from meeting in person to making these videos, and that's something that we realized that maybe we were missing before, is meeting in person and having the recognition here and in front of their families. But now and moving forward, I know that we are going to continue with the videos so that they run in the school, and that recognition can happen there as well. Their artwork is being featured on the walls here, but also on their screens at their schools and stuff. And I think that's so wonderful that the planning committee came up with that, and we'll be able to move forward with that. So I just think it's excellent, and that's excellent work. So
Thank you, Trustee Poitras. Any other comments? Thank you, Trustee Toon, for the update. Moving back to F1. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will emphasize that these are preliminary numbers. There's my disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer, but sometimes that disclaimer just needs to be said, so we won't hold us against these. But the document that I've brought up, you know, every year with the different types of students that we have, you know, the type of programming, whether they're in school, whether they're at home learning, or whether they're homeschool, whether they're international students, it gets very complex. And so this document gets a little more detailed every year. And so I'll go through the document just real briefly, just to help you understand what you're looking at. So on the far right, or on the far left column, obviously you have the schools, the community, and so forth. The first two columns after that, so the regular projected and at home projected, is what we projected at budget time last year. So in March and April, and this budget was submitted in May. Those are the enrollment numbers that we projected. Following two columns, I might have said rows before, I meant columns. The following two columns are the regular actual and at home actual that I have right now. There's a little discrepancy here. We have more at home actual. We're trying to get that information out of the system and ensure that they're not included in the numbers that are in regular actual. So again, there's another disclaimer in that this is a work in progress. Then there's a difference between that, and then the following two columns are the prior year, and then there's a difference from the prior year, so you can have an indication of where we're at. So if you look at the Nanton subtotal, so projected was 398 in the community. There's 405 in the community at this point in time, for an increase of 7 students in the community. When you look at the prior year, there was 351 and a half at, attending, 33 that were at home, And so it's actually an increase of 20 and a half students from the prior year in that area. So we'll look at homeschool as well. That's not, that's kind of over to the right, but there's 9 homeschool this year. There was projected to be 5, so we're up there. But last year there was 15, so 6 down from last year. But we know there's been a big movement to go back into the school in many cases. So overall, I think last year we had 107 homeschool students. This year we have 29, so many of them are back in the school. So if you want to go to the far left again, we'll look at, you can look at the individual schools if you want. I'll just look at the community. We projected 581 in Claresholm. We have 631 and a half. Again, a half is because kindergarten students are considered 0.5. So that's a difference of 50 students there. 527 and 57 is what we had last year. And it's an increase of 47. So a significant increase in the community of Claresholm. And 3 homeschool, 16 were projected, so that's less 13. And we had 15 last year, so less 12. So again, some of those went into the school, and we've attracted other students in that community as well. So we'll go back to the left. Maybe we'll do the home education after, so we'll just stay on the left. So Granham, we projected 56 and a half. We actually have 48. However, we are running the virtual or the at-home learning out of Granham for elementary, and so there's 18 students there. And so that's an increase of 9.5 altogether. And from last year, it's an increase of 12.5. Fort McLeod, we projected 711. There's 716.5, so 5.5 up, and 25.5 up from the prior year. Pincher Creek, we projected 473.5, 494.5, so 21 up, and we're 25 from the prior year. Livingston, 236.5, we're at 255. That's 18.5 up, 17.5 up from the prior year. Crow's Nest Pass, this is where we go down a little bit. 634 is what we projected. 586.5 is what is actually there. 47.5 down from projections, and 16.5 down from the prior year. So outreach, we have we projected 16. We have 32, which and last year we had 16. So actually, I'm not following that one up there. Oh yeah, there was no at home. So that's 16 difference, and we're down from the prior year by 6. Colony schools are right on from what we projected. So no change there, 2 down from the prior year. And if you just go down a little bit more, home education, we projected 62, we have 29, and we had 107 last year. Virtual school, this is where the numbers need to be checked, so those numbers won't be accurate right now. At-home learning, again, that's part of the virtual school that needs to be checked. We know there's 18 in Granham, but we think there's 58 that are sprinkled throughout the schools as well that we need to check on. And international students, we projected 10, and right now we have 49. So there's quite a few international students throughout our high schools. So yeah, that's kind of the rundown. It appears that we're including, home education and so forth. We're about 126 students higher. That includes the international students and so forth. Within the schools, there's 85 higher, but again, there's 58 that we have to account for, whether they're strictly virtual or whether they're in the schools. So there might be a sprinkling of that need to come out of the schools and go into virtual school or at-home learning. Sorry, that's the best I can give you at this point. Does give you an indication that many of our communities are up from the prior year and up from our projections. And so which is good news. The biggest challenge with that is the revenue will catch up, with an adjustment in the following year or at the end of this year, but takes 3 years to slowly, because of the WMA, slowly give us the revenue that are warranted for that number of kids if we maintain that level. So anyway, I'll just leave it with that, and if there's any questions, Madam Chair.
Any questions? Trustee Poitras and then Trustee McKee.
I know you love when I start questions like this. Maybe this isn't the right time to ask this. I'm just curious, and you might not have this information right now, but we were seeing a trend in some of our colony students going farther in their education. Are we seeing that that's continuing, and is that reflecting in the number? More kids are in the school, not just because more are entering, but less are leaving at that earlier grade 9, grade 10 area and continuing on? Or is that not something you can talk about right now? Maybe you don't have the numbers.
No, I don't have the details in front of me to bring to you. There is a trend, and it really depends on the colony and the school, or in the year. We do have some students that are pursuing beyond, grade 9. We also are seeing that in the Granham School, where they have implemented some programming for high school students for potentially the Mennonite community that would be looking to go beyond grade 9 as well. So, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Trustee McKee?
Okay, going back to the Graham schools again, you had 18 students that were going to, who were counted in the student numbers as, I believe it's for the virtual part. Are those students, will they be pursuing the virtual schools for the whole year, or could there possibly be some changes within that number of 18? Like, could they be going back somewhere else eventually, or back into the school? Or I just curious about that.
I might have to defer to somebody that knows a little bit more than I do. Right now, those are virtual students throughout the jurisdiction, elementary students that are being accommodated through the Granham School. But
September 30th is our pivot point to decide if you're going to be in virtual school for the year or go back to the classes. So.
Thank you. Trustee Toon and then Trustee Yegas.
Thank you. I know it's great seeing the increases in a lot of areas in here, and with the uncertainty of the year and online and stuff. I know a lot of parents had angst on making choices and decisions on what was going to be best for their kids and families. Just seeing the numbers in Crow's Nest Pass, I know it's early. Is there any indication, are those students making other choices within the community, or are they going moved away or relocated? Just wondering if you've had any feedback on why the numbers are so large in that area.
it's a great question. However, I haven't talked to any of the administrators so far, or at this point. So once we have the September 30th number, we'll get that kind of detail and be able to provide you more response there. Right now, these are just numbers as to what's in the system as a preliminary, just to give you an indication of what's out there. So that detail is to come yet.
Trustee Yegas and then Trustee Long.
I don't know if you could respond to this, but were these numbers are as of when? As of this week, last Friday?
As of yesterday.
As of yesterday, because I was just wondering if we noticed any trend going back to virtual or home schooling or home learning or things like that in the last, since the new mandate came out and changes have come out.
We have not noticed significant changes since the last mandate or the one we've had on Thursday. So we've been watching it, but we haven't seen significant shift to virtual school. If that answers the question.
Thank you. Trustee Long.
things were quite different in the Crow's Nest Pass last spring in terms of a positive economic attitude. So to answer Trustee Toon's question, there were families and individuals who at that time were, how should we say, scanning the area, researching, making early plans to move to the community. And schools were expecting to have an enrollment based on conversations, and that included real estate, people that were exploring purchasing houses, and of course we all know that that's gone by the wayside since. And so I know, especially being specific, homes that were sold that are now back up for sale. The sales didn't go through, so that certainly had an impact on enrollment.
Thank you, Trustee Long. Trustee Poitras?
I know that last year we had a lot of students who were unsure at the beginning. I'm wondering this year, are we setting a time where they need to decide by September 30th or October 10th, whatever it would be, to either stay at school or be in the online? And is that a decision they need to make for the year, or are we allowing them again to just choose for this semester and then decide again after Christmas? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzic.
At this time, September 30th is the date that they'll have to choose to be online for the year or for the semester. So,
thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Can I just add to
Absolutely.
Chad's? Timeline is really important because it's really challenging to mid-year make adjustments to a school jurisdiction with regards to staffing, and accommodate that. So of course we're always monitoring what happens with the pandemic and things of that nature, but in order to have resources where they need to be to support the kids where they need it, then it's important to have that timeline, at least initially.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. Trustee Yeagas?
I'm going back to Mr. Kuzak's. I think I understand from what you said is that after September 30th, they have to stay with, if they're on virtual learning or home education, they have to stay that way? Or if they're in school, is there going to be some leeway for students to be moving, especially from learning at home and in-school learning?
So right now, September 30th is that date. I should clarify for the high school. In semester 2, there will be options for students to do virtual school. So that's another option that's there throughout the semester. So I might have misspoke on that piece. For the elementaries at this time, we don't have supports in place potentially to move back after September 30th, right? So that's September 30th for their elementary, the 18 students in question. That's the date they'll have to choose. But this is a fluid situation as well. So we're doing our very best to adjust to the needs of the schools and the students as best we can. But that's the plan right now.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great, seeing none. We are now going to move on to F3, our 4-day week presentation. In response to the May 18th, 2021 board motion number 20-166 to continue exploring the 4-day school week with the April 20th, 2021 motion number 20-128, Trustee Poitras moved that the administration explore the options of moving students to a 4-day school week to better support student and staff mental health, with the results being presented to the board at the September 2021 board meeting. Division office staff will present information to the Board of Trustees regarding the 4-day school week. Now I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Seguin.
All right, thank you very much. As Nikki's pulling up the presentation for you today, I'll just let you know this is a really big and complex undertaking to take a look at a shift to a 4-day week. As we were doing the research, we took the latitude, I guess, to move a little bit away from the original motion and be more comprehensive of various factors that could be considered when exploring the topic of a 4-day week. And so that involves not only the mental health and wellness, as the original motion explained, but where the research kind of took us, and over the summer where we added different pieces. You'll see that through the presentation today. I really appreciate our senior team and coming together and adding bits and pieces. So you'll hear from Dr. Massey with the mental health and wellness. You'll hear from Lisa Furukawa about the early learning, and Chad regarding the academic pieces. Mr. Perry will speak to some financial pieces that we've been able to estimate and put into this presentation. And then we'll get down into some of the pros and cons to consider when exploring the 4-day week, and even get into some details around a potential calendar, what that looks like. And Mr. Feller will expand a little bit on the potential length of day and all the other pieces. So it's multifaceted. It was really quite interesting to explore some of the research and to see what's happening. Overall, I would say there's much more existence of this sort of format in the United States than there is in Canada, from the research that we were able to find. In Alberta, we've been able to draw in and include a little bit of more local context with the province of Alberta. While there are no school divisions that are on a true 4-day week, there are schools out there within divisions, mostly rural, that do practice a modified type of 4-day, 5-day, or a 9-day cycle and things like that. So anyway, we will share with you what we've been able to gather, and it will be a team effort. So I'll ask Dr. Massey to speak first on the next slide. So if Nikki can advance that one. And Dr. Massey, we can ask you to come up to the microphone there so that it's picked up on the recording as well.
Mr. Seguin, just before she begins, if we have any clarifying questions, should we write them down and save them to the end? Or if Dr. Massey's up here and we need to ask her, should we do so at the end of her slide?
I think when we're in the slide, it's appropriate to ask the questions then instead of making her come back up, because each one's going to be presenting to different slides. I think that if there's any questions, then we'll address them.
Okay, sorry, and I meant to address you, Madam Chair.
That's okay, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I will start off by highlighting something you'll hear throughout, that there are very few articles and pieces of evidence out there in terms of research that has looked at and thus reported on the wellness or the mental health outcomes following a switch to a 4-day week. So when we were looking, that stood out first and foremost, that there's not a lot of quality research out there. I will take a few minutes to present some of the information that's on that slide, and then a few other pieces of information just related to my general search. I really did pick at almost anything that might be related to mental health and wellness rather than looking at anxiety rates, for example, over time, because that data is not present. We do have a number of articles. Some of them are review articles you may find helpful to review. We can pass those on to you. One of them is an interesting look at what happened in Idaho after the recession in 2008, where approximately a third of their schools in their state moved to online. That's what's at the front of my head, moved to a 4-day school week. And they wanted to look at the perceptions and the experiences of their communities following that switch, and they published a fairly good review article of what they experienced. And I'll just highlight a few things from that article. One of the things that they highlighted is they offer advice to others on reflecting on changes in the research that's happening. They think that much consideration should be given to things like the fatigue of kids, given the longer days, particularly in our younger grades. There was concern noted without solid research or evidence about it, but parents and staff thinking about the consequences to those who are in a social class, and that's their term, social classes, lower SES populations, and concerns that those who are at a disadvantage may have more negative consequences. So they have an additional day at home, and they wonder whether they are, quote, suffering because of the change due to lack of activities and supervision and meaningful time spent in their day with that extra day at home. There's some report that it's getting more difficult to get kids started back into their curriculum and learning after a 3-day weekend versus a 2-day weekend. And some staff were admitting to being fatigued and less effective in that extra time following the switch. There were some questions and uncertainties raised to the well-being, including whether the expectations, sorry, let me back up there. There's questions around the well-being when there's uncertainty about what the expectations were for staff and students on that 5th day. We would highlight, you'll hear others speak to that. Switching to 4-day school week does not necessarily mean that the 5th day is off for staff and students. And there was questions about whether when students are off on that 5th day, and there are opportunities potentially in their communities to engage in enriching activities, additional reading instruction, things that would enhance their well-being or their learning, but whether, for example, there are low-income families would actually be able to access that, or whether communities would be able to step up and provide the extra opportunities that were kind of touted as being important when moving to a 5-day or 4-day school week. We'll leave the Idaho study behind. Cummings in 2015 highlighted that there are many school districts in the United States that return to a 5-day after moving to a 4-day over concern for those low-income students, seeing that they are negatively being impacted by the day given factors related to their safety at home, the supervision at home, or the activities available to them at home. Quote by another article coming out of Lamar University. This is a quote: "School is the safest environment for these kids, and a 5-day school week is the better option." An article in 2007 that tried to review the evidence and the research that was out there. So we call it a review article that looks at much of what has been published to date. So it's getting older now. But what their review found related to well-being in primarily students was that there were fewer disciplinary referrals during a 4-day school week because of shortened breaks. Okay, so to get everything in a 4-day school week, one of the consequences or the changes was to reduce breaks. The positive impact was that there was fewer discipline or behavior or social challenges during those breaks to have to refer to. Interestingly, what they don't look at is how does the reduced break impact attention span, though, for example, during the rest of the day. There were some concerns noted by these authors about fatigue given the longer day. 42% in one of the studies of kids in the younger grades said that they were tired and that the day was too long. The same article did find that with the switch to a 4-day week, attendance can increase in staff and students. So not necessarily really touching on the mental health and wellness, but we can see a correlation between potential some benefits for some staff or students or disadvantages without us being able to look at anxiety, depression, social difficulties. There's just not data out there for us. An article in 2020, more recently, that found that, so their conclusions were that there was both positive and negative health outcomes. The positive was that there was improved student engagement, decreased substance use, decreased non-school screen time, and increased physical activity following a 4-day switch. But the negative health outcomes included increased bullying, increased sexual activity, decreased sleep, and poor breakfast was another thing that they found. Two more I'll just highlight briefly. An article in 2008 that looked at juvenile crime in the 4-day school week found that following the switch to a 4-day week, there was an increase of by 20% in juvenile crimes, with the biggest impact being on property crime. And the last one I'll just highlight here, a dissertation, so someone's doctoral dissertation that was not published but is available online in 2019, found that following a 4-day school week, or with a 4-day school week, there are no significant differences in college and career readiness, attendance rates, graduation rates. And I will leave it at that. I will highlight, I can speak to, if you would like at some point, why I think there's very little research out there and what that means for us. But at the end of the day, when I was asked to look at mental health and well-being following a switch, there is no empirical data out there, or very little. I shouldn't say there's no, because we're limited to Google searches on research to try and find what's out there, but there was nothing very conclusive about the positive or the negative consequences on mental health and well-being for staff or students.
Thank you, Dr. Massey. Is there any questions now? Mr. McKee, Trustee McKee?
Could you tell me where that, where they first highlight the adolescents' health behaviors in schools, and where did, what is that based on? Is there a review that you read with regards to that, or where does that information pertain to or come from?
That's a great question. And this is one of the examples where what's online and our ability to access full text is limited, because we're not an institution that can access full text of articles without a cost to it. So unfortunately, this is one of the articles that I only had access to the results, the summary of it. So I can't, I haven't read it, nor can I easily find out that answer for you, unfortunately.
Thank you. We got Trustee Poitras and then Trustee Long.
When we're speaking of the negative effects of the longer school day on some of the younger children, were there references to, in those schools, and if you have access, to the original length of day and how much longer, like was this done at 2 o'clock and now they're going to 4 o'clock, or so was there any reference to the original length of day and how many minutes it was being lengthened by?
In a few of the articles that look at that, I'm fairly certain they would have that information. I don't have it in front of me or can't recall it, but it certainly was, from what I recall, they were smaller changes in the amount of time. So it's an additional maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes throughout a day. So that's an adding another 10 to each class, or reducing the amount of break time. If you really want some of that data, I can get it for you, but I don't have the specifics.
Do we have links to the articles?
Yeah.
Like, will we have them, I
Yeah,
think?
we sure do.
They'll be sent to us.
Yeah, we do. We can share all of the articles that we looked at.
Thank you.
With you if you want the details and
Yep.
have a look at them yourselves.
Perfect. And then, sorry, can I ask a follow-up question to that? Okay, thanks. You said that some of the younger students, when they were asked how they felt about the day, they said, it's just too long and I'm tired. And I know that when Penny went to kindergarten, she said it was too long and she was tired and she was going half a day at first. So were those students, do you know if they were asked prior to, and then, you know, given a couple months later when they had the experience, then were they asked again and there was a different answer, or?
No, this is a one-time study. So, and this is always the challenge, I think, with the research, and it's one reason why we don't have a lot of good research out there, is because the research is being done at one point in time. often during their 4-day school week. So it's not prior to and then after to see the changes. And they are reports of children, right? And so it's a qualitative result, which research does not look as highly upon in terms of the solid type of research. And that same article balanced that with the kids would stick with it though, right? So yes, I'm tired and I think the day's too long, but I like 4 days is kind of the other piece of that. But again, a qualitative report by an 8-year-old. Yes. Good question.
Thank you. Trustee Long?
That was my question.
Okay.
Trustee Poitras does that regularly.
Sorry, Trustee Long.
All right, we'll move on to Trustee Yegas.
As you were talking about these and mentioning some of these studies and that, I was just thinking of, we have gone through, a year and a half, close to 2 years of a lot of changes where the students had to stay at home and the desire to go back to school. So I was wondering, like, now we keep hearing about the mental health of students in these regards of going back to school and this uncertainty. And I was wondering if a lot of this information could not be applied. Now, I know there's been nothing written about it. There you go. There's a great dissertation for whatever somebody wants to do, a master's or a PhD, about what it has done for students in that. And I don't know if you can make a comment on it, but I think we can find a correlation in there somewhere, because we do know students want to be in school.
You bet. We certainly have a lot of qualitative reports of individuals that suggest being in school consistently is positive. But there is research out there. There's been research that's been done in the last year and a half. There's a researcher in a group in Alberta and out of the U of C that is looking at the impacts of kids, but positive or negative, on these switches. And if that's something you're interested in hearing more about to try and relate to our switch to a shortened day, I certainly can pull some of that research and present it at a later time. So we've got the research rather than just my anecdotal report of things.
You know, I would love to see some of that research, and even if you could send some of it, the information out, because, well, I guess we could all do some Google, but I would love to have some times where I could see it, so thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Trustee Yegas. I think that I think the board feels that would be appropriate to send to all of us if you ever had the opportunity. Trustee McKee, did you have your hand up again? Okay. Trustee Long?
Yeah, I was just thinking along the same lines as the time of day. We were talking about fatigue, especially for young ones, and just to make a comment that for us, it would not just be the length of class time, it would also be the added time on to busing. So our busing would stay the same. The day would get longer at school, but that also means that the kids are earlier on the bus in the morning and later off the bus at night. And probably something to consider if we're looking at research or effects it has on students.
And this doesn't relate to the 4-day switch, but it highlights your statement that we're on the bus earlier and longer days that way. There is some fairly good research out there, or some reports on the impact of early starts on primarily our junior high or senior high kids, and that their circadian rhythms and their natural clock is not to start their day at 7 in the morning and be at school by 8, but rather more mid-morning. And there is information on there related to mental health or wellness and engagement in school because of the start times at school. So it relates without being a 4-day school week issue entirely. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Massey? Thank you.
All right, next we will have Lisa Furukawa join and talk about the next slide or two. I can't remember if there's two there.
There we go. Hello. Kendra spoke to some of the areas that I'll touch base on again as well. And when I looked at the research, I looked at the children, the teachers, as well as the broader community, because when we're looking at our early learners and our students who have complex needs for learning, it really has a broader impact than just the school day. So one of them, which Kendra also mentioned, was around that affordability of what that fifth day looked like. And there was quite a bit of research that indicated that depending on the socioeconomic level of the family, that fifth day could be enriching, or that fifth day could be one that could be detrimental. And it also depended on whether there was one parent at home or not. And another piece that is around the broader community is that it noted that the employment of mothers was more likely to be impacted, that the mother was more typically likely to leave her position or reduce her hours in order to have childcare if childcare was not available, as well as the difficulty in obtaining a 1 day of childcare. There was a concern that younger children are less likely to benefit from a longer day, but once again, more research is needed. There really was not a lot out there, and we really looked hard, especially with our young learners. There was lack of evidence on achievement of health and well-being and on what family resources would be available. Kendra noted this one, that 42% of the primary students said they got tired and the day was too long. However, 89% of them did say that they love school and they really enjoyed being there as well. And around students with complex needs, those families were more likely to say they really wanted to go back to that fifth day of school, as they had more challenges in accessing the services to provide to their students. And once again, I'm going to highlight there really was not a lot of information out there, and the research that I did look at were all within the urban setting, not the rural setting.
Thank you. Any questions? Trustee McKee? Just pull it towards you a little bit. Move it forward. Pull the machine towards you.
Hello? Okay, now we're back again. Okay. My comment in regards to your kindergarten or as such. So if you go from, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but they usually have they would go on like Tuesday, Thursdays or something, and you'd have a half day on Friday kind of thing. So it's kind of split over 3 days. So if you went to a 4-day school week, what would happen there?
So within our school division, yes, it is 2 full days, then the half-day Friday. So the 4-day school week, we haven't looked at it, but most likely would not affect the actual kindergarten students. It would be the grade 1 and up, because they would still have the same number of days. However, as a senior and min team, we have not discussed that, nor did we look at any research to support or to negate that.
Trustee Long?
However, saying that, the kindergarten students that go Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday, because of busing, those days would be longer for them.
Yes, they could be. I mean, we haven't discussed what the possibilities would be or whether there'd be additional classes. So I think I would have to wait and have a discussion to see what the best possibility would be for those students, and then around what the developmental levels of these children are and what other options might be available.
Any other questions? Trustee Yeagas?
I'm trying to think of how I'm going to put this question, but one of the things you're talking about, special need, education needs, we do know, especially the younger grades, when a child has special education needs, a lot of times, especially behavioral, they need some very structured time. Whereas they get in a 4-day week, you still got those 3 days when they're at home, and they could very well lose this structure, and that could be a real issue, because it is more important to have that than and I guess the other part of it is, which I always think about too, is that in dysfunctional families where abuse is a part of it, that could increase too when you have the 3-day versus the 2-day at home. So those are just couple of areas. And your comments?
The research that we looked at did indicate, depending on what the home environment was or the other environments that were available to the children, whether they were enriching or whether they were negative environments, does have an impact. So yes, your points were supported with the research.
Thank you. Any other questions? Trustee McKee?
Just one thing, so like your point too there about the employment of mothers wouldn't be impacted, like for the childcare, like possibly on that Friday. When we went through our discussions, Wednesday, we was thinking of going to a 4-day school week. That point there became quite a sticking point for some of the parents. For most parents, it was not a big concern, but there was a group of parents there who were quite concerned about, about having daycare provided on the Friday. And there was talk about having to set up, some daycare proposal or some extra daycare in Stavely to help to cover those concerns. So, yeah.
And in the articles that we read, it did talk about the need for additional childcare or partnerships within the community. And the research is out there right now within Alberta. It is very challenging to find people to work in the childcare area. So there's multiple research out there to support that would be a concern and something that would have to be really considered and worked at throughout a partnership.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. We'll ask Chad to come forward and talk a little bit about some of the academic impact and some of the research. I guess he can stay right where he is. He's got a microphone.
I like
That's
my
probably
seat
best.
Similar. It was inconclusive. There wasn't a lot of research that's been done with a focus on academics in the 4-day school week. But I did find 3 articles I brought up here that might bring some discussion. So most of it, again, is out of context. It's the United States. These are urban and rural boards as well, but big boards that did some research on this, and the 3 articles are listed there. The first one, the one out of Missouri with a focus on high schools, it suggested that there was lower academics in language arts and mathematics based on their state testing that they do. But there was no significant difference in college and career readiness, attendance rates, graduation rates, and between them and a 4-day and a 5-day school week. So it's some of the results they had there based on those tests. The next study I looked at was the effects of a 4-day school week on student achievement from Oregon. And the summarized basically the information there that, again, it was detrimental for math and reading achievement, specifically for boys in this particular one, and the reading achievement of lower social economic students, of students of low income is what they phrased. And the third one was done longer, and again, as a 4-day school week detrimental to student success. They felt conclusively they had evidence that students didn't perform well in comparison to others in a traditional 5-day week. And specifically, again, with a focus on that language arts and math. But yeah, those are the 3 research ones we looked at and kind of came to some conclusions. Again, you can see it's a little bit over the map of some of the conclusions I drew. I tried to bring some themes out of this as best I could. And again, with the author that was part of some of these research, but there's mixed evidence on the 4-day week and the impact it has on it. And it depends on the type of 4-day week based on this author that suggested, depending on which 4-day week we choose, will have a different effect on the students. Overall time in school is a critical mechanism for determining student achievement. So again, it's about that student time, how much time the students are spending in school. And we heard from our previous 2 presenters that more time means different things for different students. So based on this research, moving school start times earlier to accommodate the lengthening of the school day could have detrimental effects on student achievement. And there's numerous articles on that talk about that and about earlier, especially the junior high, we see some research that identifies it could be detrimental. It appears that reduction in school time, which is amount to 3 to 4 hours per week, drive these achievement declines as well. So we know, or we don't know, the research that states there, the limited research that I found, states that in this particular study that if students are at school less, they don't do as well academically on their results. So again, it's inconclusive. Try to pull some summaries there. I've included those articles there for your review as well, if you want to look at some of the specific data and details that are inside there.
There is one more slide. Chad spoke probably most of it.
Yeah, and so, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so depending on the 4-day week, oh no, that's the one I talked to, sorry. My apologies, I went through that one already, so. I just read it on my screen instead of the main screen.
Trustee Poitras?
I'm just wondering if any of the research that was looked at came from any other countries aside from Canada and the US, or if it was just those two countries that were looked at.
The ones that I had access to that I could find specifically research on academics is from the United States.
Okay, perfect,
And
thank
I
you.
received none from Canada.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll move along, and some of the research and articles, as you read them, the initial reasons for exploring a 4-day week for students was really around financial savings. And so I've asked Jeff to put together some estimates and a little bit of information. So Jeff, if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Okay, Nikki, you can go to the next slide. Thanks. Just before I get into the information of itself, I appreciate where I am in the order of things. Typically, when we look at a budget with schools and the division, you're often talking about the non-financial things prior to the financial component of it, identifying what your priorities are, what's important, and that kind of thing, so that you're ensuring that those types of information are being included in the decision versus just a financial overall. There certainly is a financial aspect when you look at a 4-day week, and I'll go through that. Excuse me. So the first thing we looked at is the most obvious, and some have brought it up already, and that's the transportation. So actually the version that you have, Nikki, is 34 fewer days. It's actually 26 fewer days So transportation costs, it's assumed that there's 26 fewer days transported. So 26 fewer days that the buses are out running and picking up students throughout the year. And when we look at, there's certain costs. There's the driver's cost, there's the fuel, there's the repair and maintenance on the vehicles, and so forth. When we look at it, we have three different groups of bus drivers and 3 different arrangements, collective agreement type arrangements with them. We're tied in some of those collective agreements to a number of days, and so the impact on reduction in salaries is not as large as you might anticipate. It would only be those areas where we're not tied to a collective agreement for those days. So, for example, when we look at 26 less days for the number of drivers that we anticipate, we come to about almost $63,000 taken into account salaries, vacation pay, and the small amount of benefits that they might get in there. So that's over 26 days. Fuel, again, is calculated over 26 days. What we did is we took last year's fuel rates, normalized that for a year, and then came up with a daily rate as to what we expend on our bus drivers, assuming that the kilometers would be similar to what they would be any other regular year, and then multiplied that by 26. So the fuel savings of buses not being out and about on those 26 days would be about 46,200. There's different variables with that, right? Fuel is going up. There may be a larger savings if fuel gets to be a higher rate, but we just use the rate as it is right now, or as it was last year, and to identify what our cost savings would be. Again, this is an estimate, just to give you an idea as to where there might be savings. Repairs and maintenance may experience some savings due to fewer kilometers driven. However, there's so many other variables around the costs associated with that we found it very difficult to determine whether we'd actually have more repairs and maintenance or less repairs and maintenance. I mean, you would make the assumption that less kilometers, less cost, but that's not always the case in this scenario. We do have maintenance, regular maintenance, proactive maintenance that we do on an annual basis with these vehicles, which is mandated by our license agreement and so forth. So we think that there would be a minimal decrease in costing for the maintenance of vehicles because we continue to maintain them the same. Where we may find savings is we might be able to have them a year longer or so when we do that. So it might, in capital costs, there may be a savings there. When we look at that overall, total anticipated savings is about $109,000, taking that into consideration, give or take a few thousand here and there. A couple other comments. Funding uncertainty. Currently, the way we're funded in transportation is a block amount of funding, and they're doing research with regards to how they would fund us in the future. Discussion has been as to tied to kilometers driven. So if they were to come out, and this is an uncertainty, I don't know that they will do this or that they have any intention of doing this, but the uncertainty around it could impact the future as well. If they tie our funding to the number of kilometers that we drive overall, then it could have a negative impact as well. Non-financial costs may increase difficulty in finding bus drivers if they work fewer days, resulting in lower pay and things of that nature. So with the good, meaning the cost savings, there potentially is some other non-financial items to consider. That's transportation. If we go to the next slide, we did take into account facilities. Again, challenging to understand what it might look like in some areas, but when we looked at the salaries, we assumed that there's 27 days, looking at the calendar, 27 days where we would have custodians in the jurisdiction, fewer days worked by custodians throughout the jurisdiction. Now, one thing to take into consideration is we only have a few of our communities that are actually our employees, and so in that first salaries calculation, that would be our employees that would work fewer days, 27 fewer days in the year, and they're potentially a $43,000 savings, taking into account all the things that we took into account with bus drivers, salary, benefits, and so forth. Contracted custodians. So we have a annual or typically a 5-year contract with our custodians. We're tied to those contracts right now. So we would not be able to, in the short term, reduce the amount of cost associated with the custodial contracts. So over half our jurisdiction is in contracted custodians. When you look at beyond those contract dates, typically those contracts are not renewed at a lower rate. So I anticipate that there would be no savings at that point. I anticipate that the contracts would have eaten up the cost associated with that. Supplies, when we looked at supplies and what we currently put into the schools, toilet paper, paper towel, and things of that nature, considering the fewer days, we came to an amount of between $1,000 to $3,000 or to $2,000. So we used $1,500 in that scenario. Utilities, again, this is making the assumption that fewer days. I mean, the schools still need to be on. There's still utilities being expended, but as we looked at it, we anticipated, not having the heat on at certain days, keeping it down to a minimal level to ensure the integrity of the facility and so forth. We looked at that and found that there could be about $47,000 savings in that area. Repairs and maintenance, again, difficult item to anticipate. A few less days in the school, does that mean less repairs and maintenance? Not necessarily. So overall, in the facilities area, we anticipated about 91,500 estimate as far as cost savings. Okay, next slide. When we looked at the instructional side of things, you would often think, fewer days, fewer staff working those days. When we looked at salaries, we anticipated that, first of all, the Fridays are currently early dismissal Fridays, so support staff are only working so many hours on that day. We anticipated that spread over a 4-day week, that would increase the number of minutes for students, which would also increase the number of minutes for our support staff over that time. So we found that whatever time was saved, not having those Fridays, would be extended into the 4-day, and those staff would be working those 4 days, and so there would be no cost savings overall for that area. Non-financial costs, potentially lower morale of support staff, given that any targeted savings comes through decreased work for them. And overall, the summary of the total estimated cost savings is about $200,000 broken out into those 3 areas. And so I'll leave it at that. If there's any questions associated with the information, then certainly feel free to ask.
Okay, Trustee Toon, then Trustee Poitras, and Trustee Toon.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. I appreciate the difficulty of your analysis on this. It's really hard to estimate a lot of these things. In regards with the contracted services of custodial and busing, I get the proposal that there wouldn't be any cost savings because of by the time the contracts runs out, costs will have increased. But if you're comparing at that time, whenever that is, there would be a look to either negotiate a 4-day contract or negotiate a 5-day contract. I would argue that those surmise that those two wouldn't be the exact same cost. I know inflation and cost rising is always going to elevate the cost. You usually never negotiate a lesser contract. But if we are comparing apples to apples and negotiating 2 contracts simultaneously, I can't see a 5-day contract with custodial coming in the same as if we were to negotiate a 4-day. I get that they wouldn't want to negotiate a lesser contract, but that's just my thoughts on that.
I'll just respond a little bit to that. Just because we don't have a 4-day, school day, doesn't mean the schools aren't being used on Fridays either. So we typically have a very active extracurricular component to our schools throughout the year, and so that made it even more challenging where they're, now having tournaments on Fridays and Saturdays, and so we have to have staff there as well to accommodate that. So, no, certainly I agree with your perspective on that. It's just really challenging to understand how they'll use them differently when they're now available for those types of things, right? And so between junior high, girls, boys, senior high, girls, boys, and so forth, community use potentially even, then we found it challenging to anticipate that the cost would be significantly less, meaning we would likely have to have custodials in at times as well. So anyway, that was additional information.
Did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, follow-up. Thank you. I appreciate that. It is really challenging, and I agree. Community usage on a day that there's no school, if there's an additional day, would greatly go up, and we'd hope that because we love having our buildings used by community use. There would be some cost recovery on that, but we know that our fees don't fully cover the expenses that go into that as well. Just one of those things I'd look forward to in future discussions I have, maybe hearing from some of the other local jurisdictions that do this, how this affects, because they would have 2 sets of facilities within their own jurisdiction, Horizon and Palliser, what the cost difference is between those 2 things. If we're having future discussions on that, I think that might be valuable to bring that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. We have Trustee Poitras and then Trustee McKee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Perry, for noting that you're happy to be at the end, because our priority, of course, is what's best for students, and we are not looking to move to a 4-day school week specifically for cost savings. However, there potentially could be some, or we could choose to, I'm wondering, Mr. Perry, if we could choose to stick to a similar budget. Is there potential for a conversation about this transportation savings to then alter our bus routes or add an additional bus route so that we're still using that extra $100,000, but adding an additional bus route and shortening those, you know, if we just had one just for in Granham, or obviously that's way out of my scope. We have a whole team for that. But if we decided, you know, this is still in our budget and we want to keep that money in transportation, is that a conversation that could happen and potentially that could potentially add those things, or is that not something that we would be able to even look at?
No, it's certainly something that we could look at. My rough estimate with regards to costs associated with adding, you know, one bus for one community, you'd have to add them for every community to try and accommodate, you know, the lower ride times, but which would, you know, count the communities, add the bus or whatever, and anticipate the additional costs that would be associated with that. So by all means, it's something that we could look into, and I think it would, you know, you could potentially reduce ride times that way, but I think costs would be way above the 109 that we're saving in there. Yeah.
Trustee McKee?
Yes, Trustee Poitras, that was a very good comment. That was, I was pondering that as well. So you saved me asking that part. So I thank you for that. And thank you, Mr. Perry, for going through the numbers. Of course, as soon as you start talking numbers, John kind of perks up a little bit and my brain is engaged, but yeah. And the part about being last, like, well, my thought, you know, is that there's a lot of different avenues or possibilities here. Is that better?
Yeah, thank you.
Financial savings is just one aspect of it, and I thank you for what you've done here. Trying to figure this out, as you can see, and going through a lot of the numbers, that, you know, like there is some uncertainty, especially, you know, what, like you said, with funding, and it could be. I've been running business a long time, and there's always uncertainties that come up. You know, maybe carbon emissions could cause you problems in your busing, or you have to buy things too. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there, but there's a lot of different aspects to consider for this. And my opinion is that the financial part is just one of these aspects that needs to be considered. And I thank you for doing that. So, yeah. So thank you.
Thank you. Was any comment needed? Was that a question, or just wanted to just throw that out? Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Perry? Just a reminder, if we could just make sure all cell phones are silenced. That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Perry.
All right, we'll move along to the next slide then. So over the next few slides, just summarizing some of the points that you've already heard and maybe adding a few other things to consider. As I mentioned before, very complex, many different components to this. Some of the studies, as Kendra and others have mentioned, don't seem to be long-term. There is some initial data gathered and a little bit of a review or a feedback, but you know, it seems like the ones that we looked at, there didn't seem to be a longitudinal kind of study to it. So anyway, we are presenting some information for your consideration. But some of these things have been talked about, so potentially there are lower transportation and facilities costs. It could eliminate, well, it would eliminate one day of bus rides for a student. Some could argue or see the perspective that you might be able to have a better recruitment for staff because you could offer in your organization more work-life balance in terms of, you know, a 4-day week. Although we know that that doesn't necessarily translate into staff being only working, I guess, a 4-day week either. And so we'll present more information to you in a few minutes on that. With extracurricular, if it wasn't a normal, or it was a Friday that the students didn't have to attend and there was an extracurricular event happening, the students would miss less school, right? So now if they're attending even on a short day Friday, sometimes they might have to leave, before lunch or around noon. We've tried to have them leave after school, but depends on the tournament and that sort of thing. So they do miss some school on even on a short Friday. Want to stop there? Okay.
I just had a quick question. If they didn't go to school on the Friday and there was like a tournament or something, could it happen then all day Friday, or is there potential that teachers would still be in there for part of the day and it wouldn't be able to happen at that point?
Yeah, there is potential
Okay.
that it could run at the same time, even that the teachers might be involved in a professional development activity. However, the consideration would be, would other school divisions allow their students to leave at 8 or 9 in the morning and be gone the whole Friday?
Yes. And
We
then it
generally
affects-
only do that
yeah.
across the province for provincials, but
Right. And then I know it affects, like, if those teachers are gone, that's their instructional minutes and all of those different things. So I was just wondering if it could happen. Thank you.
that's a possibility. Okay.
Sorry, we'll just let Mr. Seguin just finish his talk, and then we'll ask the questions at the end, if that's okay.
So we'll just do one slide maybe at a time.
Yeah.
And so these, and you could list, probably 100 different items here from the perspective, but I'm just kind of picking out some of the things that we talked about through this. So perhaps if used very effectively and efficiently, where there's professional development occurring on the 5th day of the week where students weren't in attendance, then you might be able to have less teacher time away from their classes, right? So they could move their professional development opportunities, not always possible, but where possible, to the Fridays or the 5th day in that week, and therefore saving, potentially sub costs, and more importantly, the regular teacher being absent from their students during that time. Something like this, where there is a division coordinated high school schedule, could allow us to think of our school division, our high schools, as one big high school, right? And when we think of it that way, we could look for efficiencies and broaden the amount of course offerings that are available. Mind you, some of them would have to be virtual and that sort of thing, but that's a potential advantage to something like this too. And then jurisdictional consistency. Right now we have bell times all over the place, and if we move to something like this, it would require more standardization and consistency across the division. And so we'll present to you in a few minutes potential calendar or potential timetables for elementary, junior high, and high school. Obviously, those would have to be discussed more with our administrators and that sort of thing if this is something the board wanted to explore a little further, but that's a possibility too. So maybe I'll just stop there and see if there's any questions on this part of it.
Okay. Trustee Yegus?
There was mention then of teachers being there on Fridays and things like that, but on the other hand, one of the pros was that more life-work balance, better recruitment of staff and that. So, well, I could see with maybe support staff, but is this looking at having teachers work 4 days or working 5 days?
It's a very good question, and that's something that the board would need to explore further, and should they want to move down this road, then that would have to be part of the discussion. In the different scenarios, the different examples that Richard will share with you in a little bit, there are reductions in the number of staff days in a typical school year that staff are required to work, as there are reductions in the student day, but it's always the case that staff work more days than the students are there. So we'll show that to you in a little bit.
And I just, how is this going to affect negotiations? Like, like with the ATA and the contracts and things. I mean, has that been taken into account too?
Well, as I mentioned, right now we're presenting information. If the board wants us to explore this a little bit further, it would require meeting with ATA, it would require a meeting with CUPE and the other associations that we contract with. That would have to be taken into account. However, I can say that the examples that Richard will share with you from other school divisions around the province do operate on a not a true 4-day week, but almost a 4-day week. And so, for example, students might attend 150 some days in a year, and staff would attend 170 some days in a year. And they are part of the Alberta Teachers Association and CUPE and other things, and it does work in those school divisions, so it is possible. Okay. All right, so if we're looking at the opposite side of things and maybe some disadvantages or cons to the potential exploration of a 4-day week, you know, there's always this feeling, I shouldn't say always, but there has been expressions at time that, oh, my kids are never in school, and so by going to a 4-day week, that might be magnified a bit, or the perception might be, you know, that teachers are never at work either. And so if that's the case, these sorts of feelings could be magnified, because definitely there would be less days required for students and for staff to be at work, even though those days are longer. Some people could argue that it creates a condensed week, or a condensed work week might create more stress for staff. You have the same amount of work that you're doing, but now you're condensing that time to get that done. So rather than, you know, the 5 days a week, it's condensed to 4 with students. Students who miss a day of school because would miss more instructional time, because now if we went to a 4-day week, every day would be the exact same length. And so there would be no more shortened day, Monday through Thursday or a Tuesday through Friday, for example. They would all start and end at the same time, regardless of the day of the week. And so if a student has a medical appointment, is sick, a funeral, any sort of school absence would result in some additional time lost, because we're condensing that week. Childcare issues, I think maybe Lisa brought up this point a little bit in her conversation, but one less school day a week results in parents who need childcare to have a little bit more expense, you know, 1 day a week. So that's a consideration. Our commuter schools, so we've got schools in Staveley and Granham where they already have long days. And so with the addition of additional minutes in our other schools, that would impact Staveley and Granham as well, under the current scenario that we've got at this time. So right now we have buses that transport students to Granham and Staveley and drop them off earlier, and then move into Claresholm, Nanton, for example, and for those students to start. So already Staveley and Granham have longer days. We would have to take that into consideration if this was explored further. You know, would there be options for Granham and Staveley students to have a true 4-day week where there was no weeks in the year that they were attending beyond 4 days, to save some minutes that way? Would we be able to reallocate dollars, as Trustee Poitras mentioned there, taking those surplus dollars that are saved in transportation or others, and run, you know, for example, Granham and Staveley with their own bus routes, and so they're not tied into the other schools? Again, we would have to weigh the costs and efficiencies of doing that, but that is a consideration that does need to be taken into account. The Livingston School Academy also, because they've got grade 5 through 9, 5 to 12.
It's a ski academy, not the school academy.
Oh, I said school academy.
Yeah,
Ski academy. I had school on my mind here, obviously. But the Livingston School Academy, yes. We would have to explore that a little bit further. It's a really important program. It's proved to be highly beneficial for many of our students, and we would want to make sure that, you know, we minimize any sort of impact there that would be negative, and so we'd have to explore that a little further. By everybody in the school division moving to a common timetable and a very reduced calendar, it would be very fixed. And so the current flexibility that schools have right now to, based on their local context, request additional days off here and there, which might be different from another community, that would be more limited. And so because we would be very tight for the minimum requirements for time, that additional flexibility that schools experience now to take additional days off for their own local kind of context would be severely limited. The reductions that could take place might come on the backs of support staff, right? That's a reality to consider. And so if we have our support staff, bus drivers, other support staff working less and being compensated less, will that be harder for us to recruit staff to those positions? That's something, again, that we would need to explore. There's another factor. It might be an inconvenience for some parents, especially because we have a rural kind of population where there's a lot of busing of our students. If we have rural bus students participating in extracurricular activities, normally they're at school on a Friday, and then they just stay after school and leave, you know, when the bus leaves a half an hour after or something. So they're already there to leave, or they're there at noon when the bus leaves. If there was a scheduled day off due to the 4-day week and there was a tournament, then somehow those students would need to find their way into the school to be able to leave. And some of them drive and some of them don't. So that's just another factor that we talked about. And then the other piece to that extracurricular there at the conclusion there of the slide, at the end of the slide, is just simply now that we wouldn't have a shortened Friday, every day would be the same length. If students did need to leave at noon or whatever it is for a game, late afternoon game on a Friday, they would miss more school. So that's another factor to consider. So I'll open up to any questions about this side of the coin.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Seguin? I just want to quickly remind the board too that when asking questions, we're not asking administration for personal opinions. As this is a presentation to the board will be deciding on how we're going to move forward to this. So just a caution reminder that when you're asking your questions, please make sure they're just clarifying questions. Thank you. Trustee Yeagas?
I was just thinking of a couple more cons on this, if we can do that. One of those, you talked about extracurricular. For the younger students, let's say, you know, in the upper elementary and junior high, if you're going to have extracurricular after school, you're really putting it late when you have a longer day, and then the students stay. I mean, you're adding that time onto it, so it is going to be more of hardship, I would think. I mean, rather than getting home at 6 o'clock, they might not be getting home to 7 or 8, and that could be issues, especially in the winter. And the other thing is, we're talking about winter. Given this part of the country where we have numerous stow days, we might not, but we know like last year there were, or a year before. So those days that we cannot control would be there too. So you're gonna, you know, as I said, you can't control them, but there will be the weather days.
Yeah, those are other factors to consider for sure.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, there's one more slide, just really quickly. So again, if the board decided to stay the course with what we have currently, I mean, overall, most staff, students, parents seem to be satisfied with the school calendar. Where this whole conversation came about and the motion was that approximately a year ago, we did a thought exchange. We gathered some feedback from our stakeholders around the calendar and how it should be constructed, and there were some comments that came from there talking about, you know, maybe exploring a 4-day week, and so that's where this motion came from. But generally speaking, you saw from the feedback there that most people at the time seemed to be satisfied with the school calendar the way it is, so that's a consideration. Our extracurricular right now with the shortened Fridays is already working in conjunction with the surrounding school jurisdictions. So that's coordinated at this time and would just continue to be that way if we didn't move forward with any sort of direction on this at all or further exploration. So initially, our school division moved to, if my memory serves me right here, in 2008, you can see the bullet, 78% of parents supported the move to a shortened Friday. There was a lot of stakeholder engagement that was happening at that time, and parents were surveyed, and then when it was determined there were 78% of parents in our communities supporting it, and I think it was Lundbrook and Nanton who already had shortened Fridays at that time. And so in 2009, I believe it was, our school division moved to this shortened Friday model. So that's going on 12 years ago now. There was some attendance that was tracked for a little while, and there was actually greater attendance or an improved student attendance on Fridays when it was shorter rather than when it was the full day. For whatever reason, it might be that a family was taking off on holidays, and so they would pull their kids out at noon. But maybe now that schools are out at 1:30, maybe families are waiting. That's just one example. In 2012, so 4 years after the initial survey, a review was conducted. This time the question was around the early dismissal Fridays and how effective they are for instructional time. And you can see clearly that 76% of the students felt that Fridays were actually better for instructional time there, and almost 70% of the teachers expressed the same feelings. Any questions about that?
Trustee McKee?
I would like to thank you for including the time frame with regards to that. The implementation of the shortened Fridays, it takes a bit of a time, like to get buy-in on any changes that you make, and you can see that took quite a bit of a time, like before the parents and that were surveyed got the buy-in to this. So I myself, I probably, of course, I won't be here for this, but I mean, it's going to take a bit of time to get this implemented. I'm not sure, like there's a lot of things that you talked about, contracts and timetables and all that. So, I mean, I guess that's just one aspect of it, that you have to be patient if you're going to make changes like this, because it will take some time.
Thank you, Trustee McKee. Any other questions? Oh, yeah, sorry, Trustee Poitras.
I don't need this information right now, but just as the board moves forward and has discussions on this, could you get the information for us on how parents were engaged when you were moving to the shortened Friday? How many parents engaged and gave feedback on that poll that showed you 78% or 78% of people who responded were in favor of the shortened models? Just to know, it seems like you got a good response. So it'd be nice to know how parents were engaged at that time and what percentage of parents responded in case we decide to do something similar, present the 4-day week to our staff and students and parents at this time to see if we could get similar engagement in the response. So just to add
Yeah,
to
I can
that.
certainly get that to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, now we'll get down into some of the details a bit. So I'll ask Richard to present this next few slides.
All right, now this is the exciting time. This is an opportunity to demonstrate that, if the board so chooses, that we can make things happen, and I will take some time to just present what some of those numbers will look like for students and staff attending during a 4-day school week. There has been some schools in other jurisdictions that have moved to a 4-day school week. Some of them are not a true 4-day school week, as Mr. Siegman has talked about, but you can see that most of the schools that are listed up here are all very rural schools in each of those school jurisdictions. And so there hasn't been an opportunity to see a whole jurisdiction move in this direction, but in some of the conversations with some of the staff, they looked upon this as very favorable to them. So I won't go any further into those schools, but you can see they have a very similar start time to many of our schools, and some of them are actually fairly close to the end time that we have as well. So we can move to the next slide, please, Nikki. So what we have here are the minutes of instruction that each of our schools have this current year, and what would be required moving forward if we were to move to 158 instructional days or 152. So that's more of a true 4-day school week is the 152 days. That would be for elementary students and junior high students only, because the high school, we are tied to PATs and diploma exams. So there would be 6 extra days throughout the year that would be required for them to attend. So the 58-day rotation would be a consideration for our elementary schools and junior high schools going at the same time. So if you take a look at those numbers, the 158 school day, we would need to have 365 minutes of instruction. So we take the difference between the 340, which is what they have right now, and just do the simple math, and that adds the number of minutes per day that would be required throughout the year. Just so that you don't have to go through all of those exact numbers, on average, if we were to do the 158 days, on average, our elementary schools would have to increase 20 minutes per day. So on average, 20 minutes per day. Our junior highs for the 158 school days would have to increase 15 minutes per day on average. If we went to more of the true 4-day school week, we would have to increase some minutes. So it's 15 minutes extra per day on average for all of our schools. So 152 days would be 35 minutes for our elementary schools and 30 minutes extra for our junior high schools. For the high schools, they would have to stay with 158 days, and that would increase their day by 23 minutes on average. Like Mr. Seguin had talked about, Staveley and Grantham are outliers in this, and that would be something that would need to be considered because as we extend the days for the commuter buses from Claresholm and from Nanton, that increases their day by another 20 minutes on top of an already extended day. If we move to the next slide, please. So we have a proposed calendar. We know that we are tied to the 950 hours of instruction for elementary schools and junior high schools, grades 1 to 9. And we know that we're tied to the 1,000 minimum hours for our high schools. When we take a look at what that means for teachers and students, is that we have a gap between the number of instructional hours that teachers can provide during a year is 907 hours. And so we're missing 53 hours between what teachers are able to teach and what students are required to have. So every teacher has 53 hours in a year that needs to be made up by another teacher. On top of that, we have our instructional hours, or sorry, our assignable time, which is 1,200 hours for our staff. The most that they can provide is 1,200 hours. Right now, we are on average around the 900 hours of instruction for all of our teachers, and around 1120 for our assignable time. Those things don't change when we compress our week. Those hours are still there. So the piece that want to point out is that Clara had mentioned, you know, we have winter. And so Livingston Range has always tried to build in an extra couple of days into their minimum to our minimum number of minutes of instruction. So the province requires 950 and we require 960. For high schools, the province requires 1,000 and we require 1,010. So next slide, please. One of the keys to any kind of successful change will be what we call points of intersection. So the time the bell times in any schedule, what makes the opportunity for us to have those scales of economy is where we have intersecting points of time where we can have junior high teachers and high school teachers being able to move between schools or between communities or whatever, right? So when you take a look at the proposed timetables, you'll notice that there is time for that change built in keeping with 80-minute blocks in high school is similar to the junior high and the elementary schools using a 40-minute to 45 minutes. Building the breaks in on either side of those intersection points allows us to have that opportunity for teachers to change throughout. Nikki, if you want to keep on going through, that's the high school. There's the junior high school. So we're looking at 45-minute block on the front end, but everything else moving to the 40-minute blocks afterwards. Next slide, please. The potential elementary is the same idea, except front loading or end loading the 45 at the end of the day. So we know that there is an opportunity for the coordination of bell times, but the important part is, again, the bookends, the time we start, the time we end, and then the points of intersection along. So we can certainly take a look further at this if the board is wishing to pursue the 4-day school week and make some other changes. One of the pieces that I thought might be of importance is when we take a look at our contractual obligations with a duty-free lunch. So duty-free lunch is 30 minutes per day that all teachers have within the contract. By removing one Friday, that's removing that 30 minutes. That equals about 17 hours for every single teacher, which is about 2 days. We have to provide that extra time to those teachers to have that break, which could potentially be another cost savings. But we're not sure yet. There's more calculations to do on that. I think if you can move to the staff calendar, where we have the 158 instructional days and the 172 operational days. If you can just click that so we can take a look at what the year would potentially look like. So you'll notice the start time of the year is very similar to what we've been doing in the past, where we do need to start prior to the September long weekend. This would be for the upcoming 22-23 school year. First day for students would be on the 30th of August. Now, whenever there is the yellow Fridays, those are considered non-operational days. So there would be nobody attending on those days, students or staff. The blue days are the days where the staff would be in session. And so you can take a look at what that would look like for the school year. So every week has 4 days. There would be no shortened Fridays on Fridays that we attend. So you'll see in September, the statutory holiday is the 5th. We would still need to go to school for the 4 days, but that Friday the 9th would be a full 6.5-hour Friday. And so that's what that would look like. And Nikki, if you can scroll down, you'll see that in January and June, all of the diplomas that are scheduled and the PATs, and those would need to be full weeks, full 5-day weeks on those days. And I think that is it for me.
Yeah, I'll just add while the calendar's up there, we have flexibility in recent years. We've been given flexibility to alter the actual day that the provincial achievement test is written by grade 6 and 9 students. So we have a window that we need to complete them. But we don't have that same flexibility with diploma exams. And so whatever day the diploma exam is on, that's the day that needs to be written. So in this proposal or this potential calendar, it shows that students would be going to school 5 days a week on those diploma weeks because the high school kids have to be there for diploma exams. And so to get in the hours and to not make the day overwhelmingly long by adding 40 to 60 minutes or longer a day, it was brought forward in this potential calendar that the elementary and junior high students would attend 5 days a week. I think it's 4 or 5 times a year, whatever it is, and that would help reduce the impact of lengthening the day. We've heard throughout the presentations that there can be a detrimental effect to students the longer the day is. And so what is that sweet spot? What is that balance? Some of the studies that we looked at would add, 60 minutes or 80 minutes a day, and that would be tough, especially in our area where kids are starting the day early on the bus and getting home late. But a more viable, option for us would be, I think, what we've presented here today, that not 100% true 4-day week, but it's very close. And that might be more desirable should the board decide to choose it. So we spent the summer kind of pulling all this information together. I appreciate, as I mentioned, the team working through the summer and gathering this and being able to present this information to you today. We know this might not be the end of it, and there would be a lot more information that would be required, but we felt it was enough that it could provide you with a picture of what it could look like should you desire to pursue it.
Thank you. We have Trustee Poitras and then Trustee McKee.
So just for clarity, every day that the kids are in school that would be on this calendar, and if we move to this moving forward, every day would have the same hours when they are at school regardless.
Exactly.
And this is also just for clarity, we would be asking our support staff, bus drivers, janitorial, all of those things, maintenance, to hold their positions, but it's not like they couldn't go get a job that they worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because if there was a holiday on Monday, then they would be required to be at this position on a Friday. So they will have to also flex with the 4-day week, which sometimes then requires them to be there all day on Friday as well. Just for
That's
clarity.
correct.
Yes? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Trustee McKee.
My question is, since Staveley and Grantham are sort of the outliers in this, the schedule would have to be modified somewhat to account for the extra hours that Staveley and Grantham would be accumulating. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think if we went back to that slide, Nikki, that showed the number of minutes, I think, so it's back a few slides.
Staveley's 10 and Grantham's 5.
Yeah, now, there's a clarifier, and that's why they're highlighted, is because if you look at their minutes of instruction Monday to Thursday, it's 360 minutes. So to reach the number of minutes that are required, they would only need to attend Grantham would be required to attend 5 more minutes, whereas Staveley would be 10 more minutes. However, what this chart doesn't include is the fact that they would start even earlier because they're the commuter school, so that time isn't captured on this chart too. So if that makes any sense, but if we looked at fewer minutes, if they had their own busing system and that sort of thing, their day would only be 5 and 10 minutes longer than it is right now. But without the busing, it would add a lot to it.
Trustee Toon.
Thank you. Now, really appreciate all the work that admin has put into this. I know there was a lot of time spent this summer researching this, and you did an amazing job, went above and beyond the request. I think you really brought a lot of different aspects to the discussion. I also want to just thank the current board for approving this process. I know that the timing wasn't ideal when we passed the motion, but I think that this information will be really useful gift to the future board to look at and make decisions and choices on what they feel the next steps are. And I'm really excited for the conversations and stuff that this will spark in the future board and in our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. I just have a quick clarifying question for Mr. Feller. So you said the average increased time would be anywhere between 15 and 20 minutes depending on the grade levels. And I just wondered in the timetable that you showed us, so the bell times, they have a 5-minute break in between. Is that a change from what it is now, and that reflects the extra minutes that had to be added in? Or is that enough time between classes? I guess I just want to know what the difference is between now and what was presented.
In most of the in most of our schools, in junior high and high school, they do have 5-minute breaks built in already, as well as some class time transition. It might be 2 minutes in one school, but it might be 5 minutes in another school. So it would be more of aligning those kinds of times in order to ensure that we have the instructional minutes in place that has the least amount of change over a day, if that makes sense. So trying to streamline everything so that being a teacher in JT Foster is very similar to being a teacher at Crowsnest Consolidated. In terms of recess times, it's very similar as well. So we have some schools that are doing 15-minute recesses. We have some schools that are doing 10-minute recesses. We do have some schools that have a 35-minute lunch, and we have some schools that have a 45-minute lunch. So it is dependent upon the community context.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Trustee Yegas?
My question is like, where are we going to go now with this? I really appreciate the total amount of time that everybody, that the central office staff has spent on this in a time when that, you know, that could have been used in other areas. In other words, you know, like they had to take time off of other major things that were happening to do this. And so now, do we just leave this? Or do we go ahead and do it? This board has been the one who's got the training. We're going to go ahead and redo this with the new board when it comes in. I think we have to really, really consider where we're going with this right now, because with all that time that is spent on getting this information, which is great information, I would like to see some kind of resolution made so that their time just isn't wasted. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Poitras?
As the one who originally moved the motion, and given the parent feedback that we got when we asked if they would be interested in seeing what a 4-day school week would look like, and if they'd be interested in us looking at it, I would make a motion that we accept this as information that the board can then discuss and decide how to move forward, whether we want to go with parent engagement, show this to them. If I think it's really important that we sit down and discuss it together to see if we think this 4-day school calendar is something that we could do if we went with the 158 days or the 152, or if it's not viable at all and we just need to go back to our stakeholders and say, we looked at it and you know, there didn't seem to be an option that would be beneficial to our students or worth bringing back. So I would make the motion that we accept this as information, and then we discuss it as a board and decide how to move forward.
Trustee Poitras has put a motion on the floor that we receive this as information.
Maybe my motion, I think I'd like it to say that we receive this as information to be discussed at a meeting of the whole. I just want it to be known, like, that this doesn't, this isn't an answer to the resolution, or to the, this isn't a resolution to my initial motion. I want to receive this as information, but it does need to be discussed, and a decision needs to be made on how to move forward. So if there's anyone who feels like they could help with the wording on that, I don't want to put, we're busy, we have a new board coming in, I don't want to say necessarily that we need to discuss it at the next meeting of the whole, or, but maybe as information to be discussed, perhaps.
Trustee Toon, did you have something you'd like to add to that before we
With the
completely
motion,
put the motion?
Trustee Poitras moves that the Board of Trustees accept the report on 4-day school week as information and to be placed on a future committee of the whole agenda. I agree that it would be nice to tie everything up with a bow, but this is a large process and there's going to be more information, and a lot of strategy, I think, needs to go into discussing how this is communicated out. It's public knowledge now because it happened in this meeting, but I think how we talk about this at school councils and how it's communicated out, it needs to be a full board-supported plan in place to do that. We don't just want to go and say, well, I had a conversation with such and such a school and this is how it went. We need to have a coordinated approach to that. So that's going to take some time, and I don't think that we want to place a time requirement like Trustee Poitras said, that this needs to be done at the next board meeting. There's going to take some time and discussion and development on that.
Trustee Egan?
Thank you. I thank Trustee Poitras for her motion, because sometimes I always feel we get information, but we have to always know where we're going with this information. So I think it's a great, the motion is a good motion, so that we do have something to move forward with. Thank you.
Sorry, I see you, Trustee McGee. I'm just trying to make sure that we have the motion. Trustee Poitras moves that the Board of Trustees accept the 40-week presentation as information to be discussed at a future board meeting.
To be placed or to be discussed, or
Wasn't it a meeting of the whole?
Yeah.
Not a board
or-
meeting?
Yeah, to be placed on a future meeting of the whole agenda. Is that?
I like
Yeah.
that wording, because then
To
it
be
doesn't
placed
have to be,
on-
we can seek more information, and it can be a two-way conversation with administration, not we come back here in public and debate this all over again. I agree, we
Agenda, thank you.
All right, the motion on the floor is Trustee Poitras moved that the Board of Trustees accept the 40-week presentation as information to be placed on a future meeting of the whole agenda. Open for discussion. Trustee McKee, you had your hand up.
I as well think this is a good motion. I think we've received some good information. The whole issue itself is very encompassing, and like I said before, there's a lot of different aspects to it, and I think that taking it back is very prudent at this time, and go back and discuss what information was presented today, and you will, excuse me, you will probably also come away with, that maybe you need some clarification on certain aspects of this proposal. So, no, I thank you for your motion, Trustee Poitras.
Any other questions or comments around the motion? Trustee Burdette?
Push the button. Yeah, well, I mean, for me, because I'm not running again, I won't be at the next meeting to discuss it. But I think the information that we received today, I mean, it was good information and there's lots of stuff there. But I'm not sure whether I would spend a lot of time looking into it, because I think the information that we received shows us that it's probably not worth all that time to spend, because I don't feel like the financial gains versus all the other stuff that we've been talking about, and the tightness of how the calendar has to get, is really worthwhile. And so, I mean, this is up to the new board to decide, but I don't think that I would take it past today. I think we've learned what we need to learn, and we know that this probably isn't going to go. But being in my position, that's where I am. I'll leave that part of my opinion here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Burdette. Trustee Long?
I agree with that sentiment. I would think we could probably make a decision right now. Most of us probably have already in our own mind how we feel about this. The work done by central office staff is incredible, and we couldn't make a decision without all that information. So, regardless of the decision that's made, it certainly wasn't a waste of time. It's incredible, and we're all that much wiser, educated now for the work you've done, and I really appreciate it. And I know that's not part of this, but yeah, I agree. We don't need to spend a lot more time on this. A future meeting, of course, based on the new trustees that come in, but Probably one board meeting or one session at a board meeting, I think we'd probably be able to make our decision.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, the motion on the, Trustee McKee.
Well, I guess I'm in the same situation as my fellow board member is. I myself, what I said is, if you're going to move forward with it, I mean, I certainly appreciate the motion. I myself, if you wanted to decide right now on the direction of this 4-days, on the direction of the 4-day school week, I would be willing to make that decision today as well.
We don't have a motion on the floor for that. The motion on the floor right now is Trustee Poitras moves that the Board of Trustees accept the 4-day week presentation as information to be placed on a future meeting of the whole. Is there any more questions around that motion? Thank you. Seeing none, Trustee Poitras, would you like to close?
Yeah, I think it's important that we don't make a decision on this today because we receive this as information. And as trustees, we haven't had the opportunity to discuss different aspects of it and look into maybe a few of the other, longer bus time or, longer days and kids being on the bus later and earlier. We've discussed that maybe we could look at what that would look like if we got more bus routes, or we haven't heard from any of our admin, and we engaged parents and heard a large number of them would like to see what it would look like. I think it's important that we at least have something that we can take back to them, that we've at least discussed it and not just say we got a presentation and decided at the end of the presentation that that was good enough, we're not talking about it anymore. I think we need to talk about it. So yeah, I think we should receive it as information and stick with that motion.
Keep shutting off on me. Thank you, Trustee Poitras. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Thank you. I'm going to call a 10-minute break right now. And we will reconvene at 11:45. I don't have my mic on. Calling us back to order 11:48. We are moving on to F4, Alberta School Councils Association. Trustee Poitras will provide an update regarding the Alberta School Councils Association. Trustee Poitras.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Okay, so I'm just going to give you guys a quick update on Alberta School Councils. Just going back in my notes here. Okay. So Alberta School Councils Association, which we are a part of, we pay our fees to it every year so that our school councils can all be a part of ASCA. And, sorry, lunch is coming. Okay. So ASCA is currently seeking financial sponsorship with its partners. They had some decrease in grant funding, which has come from the government in the past, and they need to supplement some of that. So they're currently looking at sponsorships and partnerships that they can work with, that those other companies or people will also want to connect and engage with. Students, teachers, principals, superintendents, school board trustees, government, and organizations involved in public education. Alberta School Councils, with all ASCA members, are eligible to submit their proposed advocacy resolution. So that's coming up at our school council meetings, if we can remember to remind them that now's the time if they want to put any resolutions forward to be discussed and considered by the members at the AGM. And the AGM this year will be happening on April 24th. The conference usually happens the 2 days beforehand, and that is yet to be announced. They're working with the pandemic situation and how that's going to go. It has been online, and the AGM will happen regardless if it's online or in person. ASCA is going to be recognizing September 30th as a day dedicated to truth and reconciliation, and will have their offices closed. And one goal that I thought was pretty exciting and interesting is they've bumped up one of their main goals is in the next 24 months in particular, provide forums for their members, member school councils, to express their perspective on provincial-wide K-12 educational issues. So ASCA wants to make sure that they are finding the best ways possible to get feedback from as many of their school councils throughout the province. They're looking at different forums that will happen online. They're thinking of potentially meeting with board chairs occasionally, every couple months, or what have you, via Zoom. So that's one of their goals. They're looking into different ways to explore it, and I think that's really exciting and something we can let our chairs know if we have chairs, and if we don't, we can let our principals know in case they should get a school council or school council chair, that this is a resource for them. Even if they're uncomfortable participating in the forum, they can go and listen and hear what's happening around the province and bring that back as well. So I thought that was pretty exciting. So if we make this one of our key messages, then I can send those 3 points to Nikki about the resolutions, the date of the AGM, and watching for those forums. So that's kind of all of my report, unless anyone has anything to add that they know about ASCA that I haven't mentioned, or any questions for me.
Trustee Yeagas?
ASCA is doing this, but the government announced, about a couple months ago, that they were going to give $500 to each school council. I think this is something we should make our school councils very much aware of, so that they could get into it. I don't know if they automatically send it to them or how they're going to do it, but they should be inquiring into it anyhow. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Yeagas. We'll keep that on our forefront. Trustee Toon?
Thank you, Trustee Poitras, for the update, and Trustee Yeagas as well. The word that I've been a part of in meetings is that the government plans on making that $500 going forward directly to school councils as part of the funding framework, which is good. Part of the issue is, though, they're giving it directly to school councils because of some disagreements that they've had in the cuts in funding to ASCA. And I think ASCA plays an important role and helps school councils across the province out tremendously. But one of the big challenges I've heard from some parents and stuff that have been involved, ASCA also includes charter and private schools as members, and their vision and mission don't always align with us as publicly funded, 100% publicly funded education system. So that's something to keep in mind going forward, that we support our school councils and our schools, at the same time continue to advocate, as we always do, for publicly funded education and not increasing dollars, because we've all been told from Alberta Education that there is no larger pie. The pie is the pie, and if one group is getting more money, it's at the detriment of others, and we're going to have some tough times ahead already as it is.
Thank you, Trustee Toon. I also had heard about the $500, and I just kind of have a question around it, and I'm not sure if anyone even knows the answer to it, or if it's just something just to keep in food for thought. I just wondered why the $500 was being sent to school councils and what they were expected to do with it. Is it up to them, or is this something that they want school councils to use towards going to ASCA conferences, so I just wondered what the guidelines were around it, if there was any, and I just don't understand why $500 was being sent to school councils. Trustee Toon, did you have the answer? Or?
Yeah, when they were doing it, they wanted to give it directly to the parent groups. The government said, the minister, when we were in meetings with her, said that she wanted to give it directly to school councils. The intent wasn't to go to the ASCA conference, it was to engage with stakeholders. And I know that we as a division provide additional dollars to our school councils. So as Trustee Yeagas pointed out, I think it's critical at the beginning of the year that we have those meetings with school councils to make them aware of all the dollars that are at their disposal. Through regional school council, I think there could be some neat collaboration to pool some of those resources together and bring in some speakers or other keynote things or training that might benefit a larger group, as opposed to, because $500 really doesn't go a long way for some of those programming things. But if we pooled some divisional resources or multiple school councils came together and partnered on things, I think they could get some amazing things and make those dollars go further. So I'm glad we have some amazing people working with the regional school council to help facilitate that.
Trustee Yeagas and then Trustee Poitras.
Yes, I heard the same thing that Trustee Toon did about the $500, that they're giving it directly to the school councils. I sort of also through social media, which is rumors, so if you believe it or not, but they just did not want to go through, that this was sort of a compensation because they didn't put the money into the Alberta School Council Association. And I agree, I think this is a really good thing for the school council, the regional school council to start to discuss and everything else. Yeah.
Trustee Poitras.
Given our lack of knowledge on the $500 situation and the guidelines around it, I wonder how the board would feel about making a motion that the advocacy committee look into it and write a letter to go to principals and school council chairs about why they will be receiving the $500, when they can expect it, and kind of the parameter around spending it. Do you think that would be appropriate?
Trustee Yeagas.
I think we should do some more research into looking at, we could look at the government sites. I haven't done that yet, but we could look at the government sites and see where this money is coming from. And I don't know if central office staff at all, like Daryl or anybody, Richard, or that, know anything about this or what is coming. They got more information or anything?
As far as I know, unless Mr. Perry has something to add, the only information that we've got is the same information that you've got.
Although I appreciate the thought about the letter, I also do feel that we have a strong regional school council group too, and that where we have our principals and potential school council chairs there too, that we can even, after looking into it, maybe we could reach out and just the new board could just hold a regional school council earlier, and just make sure that to explore it with everybody. So thank you though, Trustee Poitras. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for the update. We're moving on to F5, Audit Committee Remuneration. Trustee Toon will review with the Board of Trustees Audit Committee Remuneration. Trustee Toon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate Mr. Perry's help and Nikki's in bringing this up onto the screen. So our audit committee met, as you all know, one of the first things that board does at their organizational meeting is approve trustee remuneration. And our committee met and had a great discussion, and we wanted to bring it forward for information. What will be coming forward next month to the board's first meeting to approve. So this is the sum of that discussion. So the committee reviewed overall remuneration. You are all well aware of that process. You look at external factors and neighboring jurisdictions and what the current pay is for other boards as well, and that was all compared and discussed. And we discussed options of moving to the government rate versus the current rate. The start of that discussion happened when ASBA, Alberta School Boards Association, approved going to the government rate for their per diem. So that was kind of what facilitated that discussion, and that is the government rate for committee work. Feeling that that was kind of comparable to what we do as trustees and a lot of the work we do. And the recommendation was to move to the government rates with a few minor adjustments to help facilitate kind of the parameters of what we were currently doing. So it would add a 2-hour meeting rate, would be created at half the rate of the 4-hour rate. And then a 8+ hour rate would be 8 hours plus 2 additional hours. So subtracting, dividing up the rate and per hour and then adding 2 additional hours, because the government rate added a higher step than what the committee felt was appropriate for that. It would also adjust the annual remuneration would be reduced to accommodate higher meeting per diem rates. And so we'd, the chair would go to $3,500 from currently $6,800. The vice chair would be $1,500 from currently $5,900. And trustees would receive $1,200 going currently from $5,000. So this all looks like some big adjustments, but really the lens when the committee was looking at this, it was to come out at a 0. So using reverse math to, if we were going to go to the government rate, we didn't want to provide an increase on top of that with everything we felt with everything going on. We wanted to continue our tradition of being fiscally prudent. I know we haven't had an increase in the 4 years of this board, and I pretty know that it's been a long time since that, and anecdotally we are the second lowest board that we looked at in our jurisdictional scan. So we didn't feel that we didn't want to make any increases to remuneration, and we feel that this will allow the future board to consider moving in this direction without having a change in the remuneration rate. And lastly, we will ask the board to develop a device policy, and it will include the choice for the incoming trustees of a laptop, Chromebook, or iPad, or receive $200 annual allowance to use your own technology, and it must be current, up-to-date, and compatible with division operations. We feel this would allow maximum flexibility for incoming trustees to be comfortable with the device that they use, and at the same time make sure they have the technology it is required to do the job. With things becoming increasingly portable, laptops that we've traditionally given might not be the best option to help trustees do the work. So we felt like that this would help, based on the motions that the board gave us, help us move forward in that direction. But I'd ask if there's any other feedback from our committee members that are here today.
Trustee Burdette?
Yeah, it was an interesting conversation. I agreed to go to the government rates because I don't like talking about giving myself raises. So if we go to the government rate, when the government rate changes, our rate changes. That's not our choice. If the government rate goes down, we get a reduction as well. But for me, the most uncomfortable thing is sitting in a thing saying, I think I should pay myself more, or I shouldn't. And to get away from that, by going to the government rates, then we're tied to that, and we don't have to have that discussion every year as to whether we're going to give ourselves a raise or we're not. And I mean, that's why I agreed to go to the government rate. At first, I thought it was a little bit, it's almost going back to where we were before we went the way we did, but being that we're tied to something that's outside of ourselves, I think that's makes it better.
Thank you. Was there any other members of the committee? Trustee McKee?
Yeah, that's very similar along the lines that I had. That was my thoughts as well. I know we sat at that meeting, and wow, I tell you, we looked at a lot of different numbers and a lot of different possibilities and angles, and discussed a lot of things there. And eventually, like, you have to come to some, you need to resolve the situation and come up with something, that was going to be equitable all around. And Mr. Burdette has said that as well, like, instead of going through this every year, I was in agreement that if we tied ourselves to the government rates, then you wouldn't need to have these discussions every year. So that's one of the reasons why we brought this forward, with it being tied to the government rates.
Trustee Thune?
Yeah, I'd like to thank Trustee McKee and Trustee Burdette for what they've said and for their leadership on this committee. It's a hard one to have those discussions about what to pay yourself. I think it's been great having the additional community members as part of that group, and having Trustee Poitras there for this discussion as well. It was great, and this provides cost certainty if the board approves this going forward. The government rate hasn't changed since 2007, and I don't think it is going to anytime soon. And like Trustee Burdette said, if it does, it'll probably move in the other direction. It's not going to increase. So if Mr. Perry has anything else to add to.
The only thing I would add is that it's still in line with two components that were very important by the board in previous meetings, and that is to recognize some of the preparation that is completed at the home. And so there's still that monthly remuneration, albeit lower, because the focus is on work and activity, through the government rates. So I think it's still, as we discussed at the table, is still in line with what the board felt was important as far as those two components.
Trustee Yeagas?
Could I just ask, when you talk about government rates, is this just looking at travel, or is that could you tell me please what it includes?
So the government rates are the per diem rates. So the travel remuneration, the travel reimbursement continues to be the government rate, which we were using in the past, which is 50.5 cents and so forth. But for the per diem, per diems for meetings were replaced with the government committee per diems, which is being used by ASBA. So as far as travel, we did not adjust the travel rate.
Trustee Long?
So first I have a question for the committee, and then I'd like to make a statement. So going through your figures and doing your calculations, if we were to accept this, we would be receiving a remuneration equal to what we are now. So that answers that. So then my statement is, what a wonderful job you've done. I think it's just excellent. And I agree with the idea that then we're not getting raises, or we just follow the government rate. It goes down, we go down. And as Jim said, I think that's just excellent. And I really like what you have on the bottom there for the device policy being a $200 annual allowance. So really in your term, that's $800 you should be able to acquire a fairly good unit. I don't know what Jeff would have had to pay for these, but they've lasted. So I think the whole package is really, really well done. I congratulate you.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Long. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Trustee Thune, did you have anything you?
Yeah, just in closing, again, thank the committee for the work. Thank Mr. Perry. It was through the information that he brings that makes these big conversations possible, of being able to do reverse math, so we can confidently say this would not provide an increase, because we know exactly how many meetings we attended over the last few years, and can take that and show what we would do and what the cost would be. And we all know that we've had additional savings over the last year or two with less travel and things like that. So there are those variables that we can continue to the board's fiscal responsibility and make sure we're accountable to the public. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, moving on to F6, our school board election. Mr. Jeff Perry, Associate Superintendent, Business Services, will provide an update on elections.
Okay. Obviously, the information as far as the nomination day for position of school trustee was yesterday at noon. We received 8 nominations throughout the entire jurisdiction. It was a little different because the new changes to the wards were in place, and so it made a little different scenario throughout the jurisdiction. However, out of the 3 wards, we will have 1 election, and that will be in Ward 3. There were 3 positions available in Ward 1, and 3 nominations were received. There were 2 positions available in Ward 2, and 2 nominations were received. And there are 2 positions in the Ward 3, and 3 nominations have been received. So the information with regards to who those nominations are is available on our website. Individuals can go and see who has submitted their nomination papers and where who the potential candidates for Ward 3 would be through those nominations. So I won't go through those and name those in our meeting here. It is important to recognize, and I'm sure the board will appropriately, 2 individual trustees that did not submit their nomination papers that I noticed as nomination papers were coming through, and that's Mr. John McKee and Jim Burdett. And so it has been a tremendous journey and opportunity to work with both those individuals, and they've given much to the educational community through their service on the board. And so from my perspective, it's been great working with you on committees and through the board, and I'm sure I won't speak for the board. I'll let them speak for themselves, but it's been great having you, having worked with you. So if there's any additional questions in relation to the election, well, I guess I could add a little bit to the elections. So we're working with the MD of Pincher Creek, the MD of Willow Creek, the town of Pincher Creek, and the town of Fort Macleod. They will be conducting the elections for us in Ward 3. It's got lots of logistical challenges with regards to their boundaries and our boundaries and so forth. But we're working with them. The elections will be based on what they're doing for their area. So their advanced polls will be based on the advanced polls for the MDs and for the towns and so forth. And so my responsibility now is getting out the election ads, notice of election in these areas. And so that'll be the next steps that take place. More information will come out with regards to locations and so forth for those for the Ward 3 and where people can go to vote, and that'll be within the ads. So that's the next steps as far as the election goes. So yeah, any questions for me?
Thank you. I think it's pretty straightforward. Thanks, Mr. Perry. I really want to echo Jeff's comments around Trustee McKee and Trustee Burdett. It's been a great pleasure being on the board with both of you. We will miss your great, or the new board will miss your great insight and conversations that you bring to the table. So I just really want to thank you both for being on the board and doing what's best for kids. And thank you very much. I don't know if anybody else says yet, so we'll have Trustee Toon and then Trustee Long.
Yeah, echo the comments that are been made. I know those that are coming into our audit committee and our negotiation committee have some huge shoes to fill. You both have done an amazing job and brought an awesome skill set to the table in both those areas and all the other ones that you serve. So I've really appreciated serving with both of you.
Trustee Long?
Yeah, you both brought a lot of skills to our team that others didn't have. And that's what makes things so good in terms of coordination. And somebody else will be here in your place, and hopefully they're going to bring some skills that we can certainly use. Irregardless, you're both going to be dearly missed.
Thank you, Trustee Long. Trustee Yegas?
I say the same thing with Trustee Burdette. Twice I've been on the board with him. And both times it was really good. I was glad to see him come back in the last election. And with Miss Trustee McKee, I think you've been on the board for what, 8 years now?
Yeah. You did 2 terms.
You did 2 terms, so that's 8 years. Yeah. So that's pretty long. So yeah. Yeah, well, I was. So, yeah, and it's been great working with you and for both of you. And yeah, and I sort of realize now, you know what? I'm your elder. So treat me with respect. So thank you, Burdette, Trustee Burdette, and thank you, Trustee John, for all the work you've done. I really enjoyed working with both of you on whatever committees we were on or whatever else, especially John with the policy. And I guess, Trustee Burdette, you went on policy 1 year too. So yeah, thank you very much.
Trustee Poitras?
Okay, well, I'm not your senior, so I want to thank you both. I've learned a lot from both of you. When I very first became a trustee, and I right away after our training, went to Wisdom and Guidance Council event up in Calgary, and I was so nervous because I knew the whole board wasn't going to be there. And John, you introduced me to so many people and just showed me how important it is to make those relationships and those connections. And I loved serving on that committee with you and others as well. But I learned so much from you, and I appreciate the time and effort you put into the people and the stakeholder and putting them first. And Trustee Burdette, did you know someone could talk for 5 hours straight? It was awesome getting to know you better, riding up to Edmonton together and you listening to me. I think you nodded a few times, but I've learned a lot from you, and I really appreciate your straightforward way of sharing your thoughts and opinions, and letting people know that these are the facts, this is how it is, and I think we're ready to go right now on decisions or motions or whatever it is. And we don't have to talk around things in 10 circles like I like to. So I appreciate the lessons that I've learned from both of you trustees, and I'm really going to miss having you guys on the board, and your voices will definitely be in the back of my mind when we're moving forward and making our decisions.
Just so you both know, you're on call. Trustee McKee.
Yeah, I appreciate those your kind remarks. It's very nice. For myself, it's been a privilege and an honor to serve with all of you, and for Daryl, that goes on to the central office staff as well, and of course everyone else that's here as well. I really appreciate that. I'm not going to say a whole lot more, but I mean, I've really enjoyed my time here, and like I said, it's been an honor and a privilege to serve on this board and to serve the people of the wards as well. So I will just end there. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Burdette.
Yeah, if I have to.
You got to get the last word in. Come on.
Got to get the last word in. No, it's been really. I've enjoyed being back on the school board. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and while in deciding not to run again, the conversation with my wife and I was, maybe we'll use your holidays and go on holidays. And so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do some holidaying and do some things like that. And it's been really fun. I really like it. I get really passionate about doing things right.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I'm done with politics forever, but I'm done for now. And I want to thank you guys for the good time that these last 4 years have been, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Seguin?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I also wanted to say thank you. It's too bad that we wait till this time to say all these nice things about you, and we don't tell you more often how much we appreciate you and your contributions to the board. In particular, this last little while has been difficult, I think, for elected officials and trustees. Local trustees are no exception to that. And we really, really appreciate you and your contributions to the vision and direction that we're headed in as a school division. You've been a big part of that and played an important part of those decisions. And so we can't thank you enough. So all the best to you. Those of you that have elected to carry on under these circumstances and these times, I really appreciate it as well. And it's going to be, we have great things ahead still, and looking forward to continued work with you in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Maybe not questions, but more comments. All right, that brings us to the end of our meeting. We need to have our three key messages, because we don't always have three, but Trustee Toon?
The 4-day school week, I think, is an important one that we will be discussing it at a future. We received a report from administration, and we'll be discussing it at our future committee of the whole meeting.
Just for clarification, Trustee Toon, do you want just the motion presented and that we received it as, and not the whole presentation, just that we've received it and we'll be discussing it, just so, okay, thank you.
I think that will help facilitate future communication on what was in the report.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it over here. Was that the 4-day week?
Yes.
May I continue?
But not sharing the presentation, she clarified.
Yep. Thank you. Go
Art
ahead.
Gala?
Art Gala? That we're going to look into.
Appointment of Associate Superintendent, Mr. Richard Feller.
Sorry, Mr. Long, I just need clarification as to what we want to say about the Art Gala.
Well, that it's possible it's going to be video. We discussed that. And that we are considering some possible changes in the future, especially if the pandemic continues.
Okay. So we have the 4-day school week, the Art Gala, and sorry, what was the last one you said?
Appointment of Associate Superintendent, Mr. Richard Feller.
Okay.
And I won't let Clara get in. And enrollment.
No, not yet. I think we really have to start talking about what Trustee Poitras, thank you, said, and also the $500, just to mention it to them and get some more information. So I think, we'll have to put something in there that they should be aware of it. Thank you.
Okay, we got Trustee Toon and then Trustee Poitras.
Well, I'll make a motion that we include the whole agenda as our key messages then, if that just covers it.
Why not? This is our last board meeting. Let's just put everything on there. Trustee Poitras.
Yeah, I would say let's do 4 and do ask in the $500 and not the Art Gala, because there's not much to say about it. Like, it's happening, like it did last year with the video. I don't know what I would say too much about it.
I think that maybe I agree with that. I just think that there's still so much to be determined around the Art Gala that because we don't even have everything set up for it yet, that it can just be mentioned that more information will be coming around that, or do you guys want to leave it as is?
I think we should take it out.
Okay. Trustee Yeager?
I was just going to say, I think we should just say more information will be coming because really, I don't know how much I could discuss it at this point,
Yeah,
because I really
so
don't know the information, so.
I think that we will take the art gala out, Nikki, and that if anybody has any questions around it, if they ask us, then we just will be saying to be determined, because we're not sure exactly what that's gonna look like yet. And we will have new committee members sitting on that committee, so it'll be up to them. So pretty good, guys. We got it down to 4.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
Madam Chair? The enrollment is preliminary. It's not the final enrollment as of September 30th. So, you know, even the information that was provided could change. So I'm not sure. I mean, the trend, you can discuss that the trend seems to be that more students are there than what we originally projected. But I don't know that I would get into a detailed conversation about where the enrollment is until we have dissected all the enrollment and provide a document for you.
I think that I agree with that, Mr. Perry. I think that if you just had a little statement just saying that this is our preliminary and as of September 30th, we'll have more accurate information coming forward. So I think that that would be appropriate. Trustee Poitras?
And maybe that would be a good time, because we will be presenting this at school councils, to just mention that this year we will be, parents will have until September 30th to move their students online or decide to stay with in person for the remaining school year. That's for elementary school kids, and then high school, there'll be a second opportunity in January. Maybe if we could just have a little bit of a write-up on that. It's a good opportunity to share that information when we're with parent council, school councils.
Is the board okay with that? Okay. Nikki, you're good with information? Perfect. In camera, recommendation that the Board of Trustees, in camera? Okay. No? No? Oh, we don't, I'm sorry, we don't have to go in camera. Sorry, I should have clarified that before our meeting, but I know who wants to adjourn the meeting. Trustee Burdette, recommendation to vote in favor of the meeting being adjourned at, what time is it? 12:27 by Trustee Burdette. Thank you, everyone.